Hello?
Testing?
Testing,
No, I'm
testing.
not.
Nope. Testing? Okay, thank you. All right. I will call the meeting to order at 7:01 on Thursday, December 2nd, 2021. And just to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on HWCam. I think that, did I say everything I need to say? Okay. And we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Next we have our land acknowledgement, and Jen Carr is going to read that for us.
The Hamilton-Wenham Regional School District would like to acknowledge the Massachusetts tribe, the tribe of indigenous peoples from whom the colony, province, and Commonwealth of Massachusetts has taken their name. We would like to pay our respects to the ancestral bloodline of the Massachusetts tribe and their descendants who still inhabit historical Massachusetts tribe territories to this day.
Thank you. So next we have citizens' comments. We have a Zoom link for citizens who would like to comment virtually. For those who are on Zoom, just know that after the public comment section of the meeting ends, the Zoom link will be closed. You can still continue to watch the meeting on HWCam, which is live streamed on YouTube. But that Zoom link will be closed after the comments. As always, I ask that anyone who wants to offer a comment, please keep your comments to 3 minutes. And please know that we are so appreciative of this opportunity to hear what you have to say, and we're listening. So I'd like to start. Eric, do we have anyone on Zoom who would like to offer a comment?
Anyone on Zoom would like to offer a comment, please use the raise hand feature.
Oh, thank you. Okay, no one right now? I'd like to remind the members who are here in person that we currently have a mask policy in place in our school buildings. So I ask that everyone who is present, please put on a mask during the meeting, or if you choose not to, I'd ask you to leave the meeting, please.
I would like to comment first.
Excuse me, no.
I can't wear a mask.
You are not recognized by
Okay.
you are not recognized.
I can't wear a mask,
You
and I
are
would like
not
to comment.
recognized by the chair.
Okay, can I be recognized so that I can explain?
Please sit down.
Okay.
At the current guidelines in place, we have a school policy that people need to be masked in school buildings at all times.
And there was an exemption with the governor.
You know what?
I would like to say my thing and I'll leave. But I honestly feel like I'm being discriminated against because I cannot. My doctors told me not to wear one.
Madam Chair.
We may need to, make a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair, may I suggest that if she would like to comment, the Zoom link is open, she could leave the room and log into the Zoom and make comment through the Zoom link?
Thank you. That is a reasonable suggestion and could have been taken advantage of. I don't anticipate that the Zoom link will be open perhaps long enough, but I think that would have been a logical and available option for comment. At this time, I'm asking you to put on a mask or depart. Okay. I am going to ask you to comply, or we can adjourn for a few minutes while I compose myself so that I can.
I have 3 minutes, I want to say something, and then I'll leave. I don't think that's unreasonable.
I'm going to adjourn the meeting. The meeting's adjourned. We will return we'll adjourn for 10 minutes. Okay, and we are, I call the meeting back to order at 7:09. Okay, does anyone in the audience want to offer public comment? And is there anyone on Zoom who'd like to offer?
Zoom that would like to offer public comment, please use the raise hand feature.
Okay, so I am going to consult briefly to ask our policy committee. I believe that if someone submits a written statement less than 3 minutes, that this is that it would be something we could present. Is that correct or not?
I believe that that is the case.
I believe so,
You
too.
could choose to read it out loud.
I have not had the opportunity to read this, so it is a little bit nerve-wracking, to be honest. But I am going to take that on, and rather than ask a member of my committee, I'm going to go ahead. This was presented to me today by Beth Herr of 270 Asbury Street. These are Beth Herr's comments. First, I want to thank you. Oh, could you please time the 3 minutes?
Certainly. Okay, you can begin.
Thank you. Again, this is me reading a document from Beth Herr at 270 Asbury Street. First, I want to thank you for your service to the community. I'm here to share the voices of many in our community. It may be different than some, but that's okay. I believe the best decisions come out of honest, direct conversation. I'm concerned about the masking on the physical and emotional well-being of our children. Sweden never masked kids in school. They are doing fine. I believe all kids need to be unmasked now. I know Department of Ed has guidelines, but what are the implications of not following those guidelines? Those are not laws. Laws need to go through the legislature. Mandates or guidelines are not laws. In the recent Department of Ed memo entitled Extension of Mask Requirements dated 10/26/21, it states in alignment with statewide guidance, again not a law, unvaccinated students and staff would need to continue to mask. If you follow the link to the state website, masks are only advised. So you as a school committee, you could choose to do the right thing and not segregate. Segregation is a dangerous precedent. Legally, under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you cannot discriminate against employees for religious beliefs. Requiring some to wear masks and others not could put undue pressure on kids or parents to get the shot. You may see that peer pressure is a good thing, so they will get the shot. But if we go down that path, there may come a time you will want to make the best decision for your child without undue pressure and be told no. This is a dangerous precedent. Please proceed with care and caution. If you have children, you know peer pressure is a real thing. Why would you care about peer pressure? I know an adult who said she gave me into peer pressure. Now she has constant horrid taste of metal in her mouth. Her specialists even said, why did you take the shot if you already had the virus? Peer pressure. If an adult will give in to peer pressure, so will kids. If they have to wear a mask while others don't, some will give in to the peer pressure and take the shot because they don't understand the risks. Do you want to be responsible, even indirectly, for a child to be injured or die from the shot? You may think this is an overreaction, but one of my son's friends has had a devastating and life-altering injury from the shot. It's heart-wrenching to watch. I would not wish this situation on anyone. It's horrifying. Today, my kids told me of a coworker in his early 20s who thought he was having a heart attack after his booster. His boss, who is also an EMT, told him to go to the ER. I firmly believe it is the parent, not the school committee or the Department of Ed, who should be making these decisions for their children without undue pressure, real or perceived. Thank you for your time. Okay. Do we have, again, just for clarification, those words were public comment that was delivered to me, not words from me. Do we have any other comments? Okay.
Other comments?
Anybody on Zoom?
Nobody raising their hand?
So at this time, we will close the Zoom link. And again, anyone who is listening on Zoom
It's closing.
you can go ahead and watch it, continue to watch on HWCam. Okay, so for those of you who on the committee have noticed that over the past, since the beginning of this year, we've been slowly reading our existing protocols, and we've gotten through all of them. And what our next on our agenda would be, I would take a motion to approve to renew our commitment to those protocols. If someone would be willing to make that motion.
I move that we vote to renew commitment to the protocols for the Hamilton Wenham School Committee.
Second?
Okay, second by Michelle Horgan. All right. Does anyone have any questions before we? Anna?
These are just exactly the same as they were last year?
These are, the exhibit is the exhibit that we've been using since August, that we've been reading from. I actually have, should we choose to do this, I have the same exhibit, but just with signature lines that we could sign today. As a hard copy, I have that. Okay. Does anyone have any discussion? Okay. Looks like we're ready to vote. All those in favor? And none opposed, and the motion passes with the 6 members who are present. And I will, Jen and I are going to make sure we're going to pass that around so that make sure we get the signatures. Thank you, Jen. Okay. Next up is our student representative report, and Chris Damaraki is going to give us some information.
Perfect.
Dana? Michelle's not on the form.
Do we want to? No, fine, I can do it later.
All right, you want to just sign it?
Important.
I can't, you know what, you know what, we have a technical difficulty with the form. I can always bring the form next time. Yeah, no worries. We want you properly on there.
Can you hear me? All right,
No,
perfect.
oh, no, I didn't.
I can hear you, but it's not real loud. I don't know if we can get that the mic at the podium turned up a little bit.
I'll just bend down like this, it's fine.
Okay. Thanks, Chris.
So I'll be reading the updates from each school in the district, presented by the student body government. At the high school, last night there was an open house. There were panels for parents and students. I was also a part of that panel. Tour of the schools, conversations with teachers. There were also club activities presented in the cafeteria, such as like student government, art club, athletics presented in the gym as well, and there were over 65 families that attended. Later we have, in the week, we had Spirit Week from November 18th to the 24th. It was a school-wide, we had school-wide events for the first time in 3 years, including dodgeball, volleyball, relay races, and the annual Powder Puff game. We also had the annual Harvest concert. Next, we have the Hamilton Wenham Toy and Bootstrap Drive. It is this week currently, the Toy Drive. It's from the 29th to the 3rd. Our student body unanimously decided to participate in this endeavor and make it a class competition, ending with a Stuff the Cruiser event. That's when the police officers and cars come into the high school, and there's like a race between each class, like who can stuff the cruiser first. So that's coming up. And so they're asking for new unwrapped gifts that can be dropped off at the high school between Monday, November 29th and Friday, December 3rd. And they're really asking for quality over quantity. They want kids to have the best gift possible. And so the Beverly Bootstrap Drive is also happening right now. National Honor Society is collecting breakfast baskets for the Beverly Bootstraps and Accord Food Pantry. They need a total of 50 bags and 25 for the Accord and 25 for Beverly Bootstraps. Items like pancake mix, syrup, hot cocoa mix, and so on. If you could please bring those, that would be very, very needed. It is also important that we can help those in need by giving them a warm Christmas breakfast this season, so please consider donating items that can be brought to the guidance office. And then we have our winter concert on Wednesday, December 8th at 7 p.m. in the Ferengi Auditorium. It'll be the band and the chorus and the harmony groups. I will be there as well. And so next up we have the Hamilton sports updates. As you all know, the Hamilton girls soccer team won the MIA Division 4 state championship. Let's go. Hamilton football got to the Elite Eight, but we did end up beating Ipswich Tigers on Thanksgiving, even though we lost to Castle.
Nice.
Hamilton girls volleyball went to the Elite Eight as well. Hamilton boys soccer went to the Sweet 16. Hamilton girls field hockey went to the Sweet 16 as well, and the cross country made all-state competition. And so now we're currently in the winter sports session. So we have Hamilton girls basketball, boys basketball, swimming and diving, boys hockey, indoor and track, cheerleading, gymnastics, and the co-op girls hockey team in Marblehead and the co-op wrestling team in Salem. At the Miles River Middle School, the bands and the choir are excited for their upcoming winter concert on December 14th at 7 p.m. The sixth grade participated in a turkey trot before Thanksgiving, and the entire sixth grade participated in running or walking routes between 3 and 6 miles. The Miles River Middle School is partnering with Accord for an Adopt a Senior drive to support the seniors and local businesses. At Cutler Elementary, the 4th grade Ukes on deck started. This is a 4th grade ukulele club after school once a week run by Mrs. Graham. The 5th grade students recently participated in a hearty debate between the Loyalists and the Patriots in their social studies unit on the Revolutionary War. Friends of Color had a very successful fundraising event with their annual ski, skateboard, and ride sale, and they were so excited to have this important event after a year off. In art classes at Color, each grade level has begun clay art projects. Last week, Winthrop students each contributed a thankful feather to the Winthrop is Thankful for Turkey, a school-wide project initiated by a 3rd grade student. The 3rd grade classes sorted and graphed the categories of feathers as part of their graphing unit in math. The Friends of Winthrop are preparing for the Holiday Boutique, which will take place on this Saturday. And the Holiday Boutique is the largest fundraiser of the year for the Winthrop Friends, and proceeds will go to the support curriculum enrichment programs. Lastly, we have the Bucher Elementary School, and they had a fun run event with the Friends of Bucher on Friday, the November 11th. As a school, they ran a combined 517 miles in 30 minutes. Nice. This week, they transitioned from lunches in classrooms to lunches in the cafeteria. Kids are separated, but not at tables, but they're getting back into the cafeteria, which is a step toward normal. That is the updates.
Thank you, Chris. I just want to say I am so appreciative. It is so fantastic not only to have an update at every school, but I really appreciate you captured the different flavors of the 3 elementary schools especially. It's really nice to have that. Thank you for doing that work.
Hey, you're welcome.
Does anyone have any questions for Chris?
I have a comment.
Yep, Eric?
Chris forgot something on there.
I suspect he did, but I know what it is.
He was recently voted MVP of the league for football, so it's a big deal. Congratulations,
Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy.
All right.
Well, I think that about does it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay. So next up is the consent agenda. This is the part where I would ask whether anyone has anything to hold. I am going to hold the donations. Does anyone else have any other things to hold on the consent agenda? Okay, I'll take a motion on the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Michelle Horgan.
Point of order.
Oh.
The motion should have included the hold. We
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I
Let's
move
try
that
again.
we approve the consent agenda as written, except for the donation section.
Second.
Second by Anna Seizik. All right, all those in favor? That is unanimous from the 6 members present. So I held the donation section. The exhibit is correct. I wanted to note that on the agenda, it is listed as disposable trays, but in fact, the trays are not, and the exhibit is proper, but the trays are actually reusable trays, just for a point of clarification. Okay, I will entertain a motion on that, if we can have that, Jen.
I move that we accept the donation from the Friends of Winthrop Elementary School of the 200 trays.
Second.
Second by Anna Seizik. Is there any discussion?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Absolutely.
So these are like sturdy plastic trays that get washed every day?
That's my understanding, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Are we ready to vote? All right, all those in favor? And the motion is passed unanimously from the 6 members who are present. And thank you very much to the Friends of Winthrop. All right, next up is new business, and we have a report from the World Language Steering Committee.
All right.
Mr. Harvey.
Thank you very much. I'm here with Mr. Menegoni, my co-chair. He's sitting down at the moment, but we'll be jumping him up in just a minute.
I'm going to interrupt you just 1 second. I know
All right.
I know that it's me, but if there's any way, HW Cam, that we can crank up that podium mic just a tad, that'd be good. Thank you.
How's that? Is that better?
That's good.
All
Yes,
right, great.
excellent.
So we're just here to give you a report. We submitted a report. This is essentially the same information, but in a slide presentation form. We were addressing District Goal 2C, which was established, and the World Language Advisory Committee was established in this fall and tasked with developing a recommendation for a long-term vision for world language instruction in the district. And our goal was to present this no later than November 30th. Scheduling reasons obviously pushed us a couple of days past to today. And just as a point of note, our whole process was truncated a little bit with the adoption of a new superintendent. I think this was initially supposed to be Superintendent Tracy's project, and he kindly shared it with us.
You're welcome.
So the process that we went through is we wanted to get a nice cross-section of opinions, thoughts, and ideas. So we reached out to parents and guardians, students and teachers with experiences in both middle and high school and in both Mandarin and Spanish experiences. We ended up with a group that was Brian and myself, 4 high school students, 5 teachers, and 4 parents, all of whom had students at different levels in the district, including the elementary. We met 5 times. October 12th, we had an introduction, discussed the task at hand and what our process was going to be. We then brainstormed some survey questions for parents, guardians, students, staff, and other schools, and sent out surveys through Google Docs or Google Forms on October 27th. On November 2nd, we reviewed the initial data using Jamboard, which is a virtual Post-it note thing where you can put down ideas, organize them, and came up with some common themes. And then on November 9th, we had some additional data that we had collected from other schools, both through our survey and that members of our committee had been able to pull from other sources, and created and discussed some draft recommendations, which leads us to where we are right here today in our presentation. So we sent out surveys to the following groups. We sent out surveys to students in grades 6 through 12 and received 166 responses. We had initially thought about sending them to elementary students, but after consulting some of the elementary principals, realized that we wouldn't necessarily get particularly good data having those students not had a world language experience. So we decided to hold off on that piece. We received 360 responses from parents and guardians through grades K through 12. And 38 responses from staff. Directly to our survey, we got 11 responses from other schools, but we also collected data through our world language curriculum leader, had quite a bit of data that she shared, and we were able to pull some other data from DESE and other sources. In the survey to parents and to students, we had included an option if they wanted to share more information with the committee. We would have an opportunity for them to do that. And Brian and I held 2 Zoom listening sessions on November 12th and had a nice conversation in one of them, and nobody showed up to the second one. But that's not surprising. It was a bit of a short notice on those, but we were trying to meet our timeline. So we pulled out quite a bit of data. A lot of it was narrative, but of the hard sort of comprehensive data that we had here, we got some parent and guardian data where we asked, what grade would you have liked your child to have started taking a world language? And here you can see there's quite a bit of desire for earlier starting of world language, starting in kindergarten and then working through 5th grade, 6th grade, and then not many people were interested in starting beyond 6th grade. So I think that's what we were pulling out of that information. We've got that same data for students as well. But one of the nice things that we found, both across the students and the parents, was how important do we think world language is to our child's learning. Overwhelmingly, people rated it as very important, and which was reassuring. You know, it was nice to see that people valued the world language instruction that we have in the district. I'm going to pass this on to Mr. Menegoni at this point.
All right, thank you. So what Mr. Hovey had just shown was the data from the parents and guardians. I'll highlight here quickly what we learned from the students. It doesn't look exactly like what we saw with the adults, but I would say around 2/3 of the students overall identified the fact that they maybe would have liked to have started learning another language before they got to middle school. And when you look at this, you know, how important is world language? I mean, you're looking at upwards of almost 90% of the kids identifying that as really important. Okay, and you know, we're asking kids, so if their experience has been a little bit difficult or bumpy, they might say, not so much, but when you look back at what the adults say, and the adults who have actually gone through that learning themselves, I think they're probably going to meet in the same point. And we also ask the kids, you know, are you going to continue to study this, a world language, when it's no longer required? And clearly, most kids said that they would like to do that. So overall, I think it's safe to say both kids and adults think world language is important. They also would like to start learning it a little bit earlier than they currently do in our district. So what recommendations, and that's really how I would want to frame this, what recommendations can we make as an advisory committee at this time? Well, we can definitely say that world language is important to everybody in the district. Also, some data that we didn't show directly on here, but there is strong interest in having options. I don't think that's surprising, just given the fact that people have different experiences, they see different pathways in their lives, and they certainly would want to have some say in how that goes. This is where we get a little bit more specific, perhaps, and talking about some of the data that we just presented, is that we should study the feasibility of offering world language at the elementary level. And I want to talk about sort of the two dimensions of feasibility. First of all, one would be feasibility with respect to the structure and needs in our budget, certainly, the staffing that might entail, but also how feasible is it with respect to the learning that has to go on in elementary schools. And we make the statement there that we certainly need input from those who work in the elementary schools, because this will have an impact on literacy work. It certainly can augment it, but we need to better understand what that would look like. And we have people in the district who are experts on language acquisition, but also in terms of how students develop their literacy. And we feel that that would be a next step that we could take to see how those two things could partner. I think it's also really important to recognize some of the other big initiatives that are happening in the district right now. First of all, with the Equity Audit, what is that going to teach us about the current structure and some of the things that are going on in our district in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Because I think it's pretty easy to see how world language can play into that, but also how students can access that at different points. We need to remember that. Also, Portrait of a Graduate. What is that going to tell us about the opportunities that we want to offer to our students, and what we want our students to be able to do when they graduate from the district? So that leaves us with, you know, really what should we be doing next year, because we've already started that planning. For example, the high school program of studies is already in process. We plan to present that to the committee here in a couple of weeks, so we need to know what we're doing next year. We feel that right now it's best to maintain the current languages that we have, offering some choice to middle school students on which way they would want to go for the 22-23 school year, while at the same time trying to answer some of the questions that are raised above. You know, what is the feasibility of having this go into the elementary school? What are we going to learn from the Equity Audit and Portrait of a Graduate work? And we do want to extend a thank you to everybody on the World Language Advisory Committee. It's not always easy to pull everybody together
students are busy, parents are busy, we're pretty busy, and we were able to get together a number of times, sift through a lot of very narrative data, and come up with some trends that we feel offers us not a concrete answer about what we should do next, but at least a direction in which we can look, and then use some of the other information that we're going to gather this year through the different initiatives that we're engaged in. So with that, I guess we're done with our presentation. It could take any questions.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I also want to thank all of you and also the people that you mentioned, the students and staff, parents and guardians for the work on this. Appreciate it. Do people on the committee have clarifying questions or questions for Mr. Menegoni or Mr. Harvey? Jen?
You said there was a desire for more diversity in language. Based on the data, what would be the top 3 languages that parents and students want to have the ability to learn?
So when we asked that question, we thought about, how can we frame it so that way we're very inclusive about what we hear in terms of interest of languages. And I wouldn't say we got a top 3 necessarily. I wouldn't want to assign a number to anything, but certainly when we asked the open-ended question, what languages would you like to see offered? Spanish, popular, Mandarin, popular, French was popular, German showed up, I believe.
ASL.
Yep, ASL showed up, interestingly enough. So we don't have that answer about, I guess, what would be the top 3 and rank them. We can just see that there were certain preferences, I guess, that floated more towards the top. But that would be an important part of the conversation that we would want to have, I think, after Portrait of the Graduate and the Equity Audit came out.
Thank you.
Michelle Horgan?
Thank you for that presentation. So I think this is our 8th year of Mandarin, and I know in this hiring environment it's very difficult, but do you see in the past 8 years Mandarin being a very difficult or challenging positions to fill when they're available? When they're needed, rather?
What's that? It is more challenging than you might find with an English teacher or a math teacher, absolutely. We've been very fortunate. We have a very strong world language department across the board, and I think that our practice, we've been able to recruit and hire those people. As you say, we're 8 years into a program, which I think lends to being able to hire and retain teachers where there is that known commitment at the moment. I think, should we make shifts in our programming, that might change our recruitment ability. But, I'll be honest, right now it's difficult to hire for pretty much any position.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Anna?
Thank you. I want to move this over here. Look at you and talk to you. I had a similar question to Jen's about what other languages in terms of offerings came up, so that's a helpful answer there. This might be a little bit of a question for the superintendent also, but the idea of waiting until the other planning processes run their course, is that intended because in order to execute either adding more languages or starting them earlier, to me that obviously means we have to look at the budget. And is the idea that we can't really implement any change this year because those other processes are still running? And I guess my question is am I reading that correctly, that we're sort of past the point of making a change for next year already, and that in order to implement this, we have to really look at what's in the budget and how we might fund something changing that significantly?
Can I take that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
The bigger piece of this is kind of the foundational work that we need to do. But beyond that, there are huge budget impacts. There are also scheduling impacts. There are also programmatic impacts that we have to try to balance against it. So, for instance, pick an elementary school. To drop a language teacher in an elementary school within the confines of the day that we have negotiated is going to cause something else to move. There's no question about it. So it's really how you start to move that around. And then you look at, do you need one teacher across 3 schools? Do you need 2 teachers to balance 3 schools? So then you're looking at budget implications, that could exceed $200,000. Beyond that, it's really what we decide as a whole, and I think it's a good opportunity for us to bring this into the strategic planning process, because it's a bigger discussion. Really, where do you want to be as a district, as a school committee, in representing languages? Do you want to say, yes, we want to start to work towards a K-12 system, and then it's a process of developing what it looks like, working with all the people on the ground to figure out how the puzzle fits together, and then looking at the reality of the impact. So we would actually model that out and then bring it back and say, okay, here's one of the ways that it might come together for us, or might not. So I think there's just a bigger puzzle to kind of go through before we. This is probably like the foundational pieces, the work that they've done here.
Mm-hmm. So would it be accurate to say, thank you for that, was sort of what I was getting at, but would it be accurate to say that from the work that you've done, do you get a clear sense that there's a desire for change within the district? Because I feel like the data suggests that fairly strongly.
Yeah, there's a desire to look carefully at offering these opportunities in the elementary school. And that's the context in which we asked the question. Then I think as this group here decides if we want to push forward with this, that's when you're going to start having the honest discussion about, and here's the impact on the rest of the system. And so we'd have to weigh that as well, because right now it was just, are you interested in having more world language opportunities? That would be great.
Right.
Okay, then we have to say, well, if we do that, then this is kind of what the fallout could be for
Right.
that, or this is what we have to give up. I mean, I think, anytime you change something is usually lost generally.
So would it be realistic to think that when this next step moves forward and get through the planning process, that maybe this is a bit of a question and a request, that we could have sort of, option A would be if we added additional languages at this level, it would look like this. If we started languages at kindergarten, brand new, it could look like this. Is it a way to, when you do the modeling and look at the financial and sort of the literacy impact, for us to sort of try to get a sense of like what would this look like, and then we can try to get a better sense from the community of like what's the thing that's most important? I would like to see some options, because I could see it going a couple different ways, and I know we probably don't have enough money to do everything unless we make a catastrophic cut to something else, and maybe we want to do that, but I don't know that we're ready to decide that right now.
Eric?
Also want to caution, excuse me, the MSBA pipeline issue could put a wrinkle in any plan we determine too quickly. So I think waiting that out a little bit, we should know in December where we stand with the MSBA before December's over, because that all of a sudden shifts where your grades, how your grades get configured based on what you have to use for buildings, and that's many years out. But can we build something along the way as we get into, if we get accepted to build a project and the communities accept it, what does that look like? That might be the opportunity to build for. And some communities do it by bringing older kids down after school and just doing, Haverhill High is a good example of talking to their language people there. They have the high school kids go down to the elementary school after school because they get out earlier, and they just do 35 minutes or 40 minutes of basic introductory language work. And that's, that's something maybe we look at as an option for kids. Kids have after-school music, and they have other after-school events. That may be a kickstart. But definitely, I think the strategic planning process gives us the opportunity to come up with multiple models, because I do think there are a couple of ways to approach it. Either way, it's going to cost us money, and it's going to impact something that we already have in some way, shape, or form, unless something changes within the limits of the time of day that we're confined to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. David?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little curious. This really all came about as a result of, the discussing the possibility of losing Mandarin, right, because of budget reasons. Have we sort of gone anywhere with that, right, as we're entering another budget cycle or in the middle of another budget cycle? To come back and say, well, now we want to add all this. This doesn't solve the fact that we almost had to cut Mandarin last year, to save money. Seeing the support there is nice, because, for us here means theoretically we get the vote, come budget, when we put the budget forward, excuse me, but in the meantime, we could be sitting here talking about plans for, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, but what does it look like this year? What does it look like coming up for, the budget cycle for next year? Because I'd really like to sort of have some sort of guidance or hope that there was something in there, to sort of help us figure out where we need to make sure there's money, to put it bluntly.
Right. I think that turns us back to what we were recommending about looking at the bigger picture. I mean, we could certainly, not that I would feel comfortable doing this, but we could make a recommendation to say, we're going to reduce Mandarin, reduce Spanish. But I think that leads us right back to where we started from, with a narrow view and not a long-term vision. And that's the piece that we were really trying to find out, is what is the long-term vision for the district? And I don't think this committee could make that decision in isolation. I think it's more important that we really tied into the bigger work of the district, and based on that and our sort of timing of the budget cycle, as well as the program of studies at the high school and all of that, it doesn't make sense for us to make a radical shift in our programming this year. That's kind of where our thinking was on that. We may ultimately go down one of those paths, but I think it's important that it's done thoughtfully. And
Right, I think it needs to be understood that even a radical shift is, you're looking at, a 3-4 year process anyway.
Right.
If you're gonna get rid of Mandarin, you have to phase out the kids that have actually already entered Mandarin.
Right.
So, I think that's important to sort of put out on the table, that, I don't know, it's interesting. I don't think there was anything really surprising by anyone in here, but it was really good to know that there is such strong support for it, so we can start looking at the long term. Thank you.
We did pull out some other data that we didn't report here that was more germane to the in particular instruction in the classroom. So we had also asked about some information about what did people know about the seal of biliteracy, which helped us inform us that as a department and as a district, we need to do a better job educating the community and parents about what that is, and students as well, if that's going to be part of what we're striving for. We also pulled out some feedback, just general feedback about how our language instruction is going, and that information can be used by our world language teachers to help improve their practice. So overall, I think we pulled a lot of good information out of this, but I think, again, we have to look at the bigger picture.
Okay. Julia?
So can we just make sure that we revisit, like we're revisiting this continually? I'm not sure if it's an agenda item or if it should be one of the key pillars of the Portrait of a Graduate or in some of that other work. Because what I worry about is all this wonderful research and work, and we're not continually revisiting it because we're putting out fires all the time.
Well, so I guess I'm wondering if your question is that one of the recommendations, you made a very concrete recommendation about next year, and then some of the others, which I hear you saying, was that you feel like this information is going to be an important component of the Portrait of a Graduate. So your question is, how do we make sure that that happens? Is that, I don't want to put words into your mouth.
Yes. So how do we make sure these conversations keep occurring?
Right, and that this is a specific part of the strategic planning. Eric, do you want to answer that?
I just want to clarify something. It probably wouldn't become part of the Portrait of the Graduate. That's a very different process. But I think the work that we have over the next couple of years is important to who we want to be. And that's where the conversations start to center around, what do we want to offer kids and families? What does that look like, pre-K to 12? And how do we build that successfully without creating, huge, crazy impacts within our budgets, trying to keep things under control? It's important for us to keep this type of information and a lot of the other reports that we've already seen this year, to bring that into the process, to be able to say, who do we want to be as a school system? And then what does that vision look like? And that, I think, is up to all of us sitting here to be able to determine that based on all this information. So the strategic planning process gives us the opportunity to lay this out over a few years, to build towards some type of a vision of our school system. Like, what does that look like? With the foundational pieces being the portrait of the graduate, and things like your language program, or, you know, your math offering, what do you want to be known for? You know, there are communities that do K-12 language integration, and they take some of their content classes in language. So do you want to go in that direction? So those kind of bigger picture things are important to keep alive in the conversation. I agree, and that would be part of, I would assume we'd build that into that strategic planning process as part of who we want to be. What do we want to offer the people in the community of Hamilton and Wenham? And I think that's really an important piece of the puzzle, if you will.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's up to us, to this committee, to make sure that when we ask questions about the strategic planning and also about our district goals, I mean, that as we continue to review the goals and, you know, as the year moves on, to make sure that this is front of mind, that how does this impact moving forward? Anybody else? Oh, I'm sorry, Jen.
So I do agree with Julia. I really would prefer not to walk out of this meeting without like some concrete goal of what we're gonna do with this next. It doesn't have to be an overarching statement, but I don't want this to die on the table.
Well, so, okay.
Michelle.
So the recommendation is to wait until the strategic plan. The recommendation is to wait until the strategic plan. So it's not dead, it's waiting for the next report to come before advancing forward.
But don't we have to, if we want this to advance forward, don't we have to have it incorporated into the strategic plan, not wait till we get the strategic plan?
Then you're telling the strategic plan what belongs in it. We don't know if the strategic plan, I mean, we may come back with a strategic plan that says we want our kids to come out as global citizens. Then this would be part of that. If it doesn't say that, then this might not be part of it. It may be that we find out through our strategic plan that foreign languages isn't a priority of the community. But to say we want this in the strategic plan puts the cart before the horse.
And it won't die on the vine. I mean, it's really going to be part of my entry plan report that will come to you later in the year. I forget when it is, February, March. So it's not going to go away.
Perfect.
And certainly that would be my commitment to this committee, to be able to keep those kind of balls in the air, if you will, as we work through this process, because it's what I'm trying to work towards within this district is helping all of us determine who we want to be. This might be a piece of that puzzle, and I think all of those pieces need to stay active in the conversation. So I would put that on my shoulders to be able to deal with that and keep that moving forward for everybody. It's important. It's a huge piece of the puzzle.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Are you going to present from up there, Eric? Okay. I think we're going to take a moment while Eric gets organized. He's going to talk to us about Mcas results.
Good evening, everyone. This is a quick overview of our MCAS information. As you know, it's a little bit different this past year because the way the process has been run. Some items of note in this process: there was no assessment given in 2020, so you'll see that gap in these charts if you haven't already. And we really know for a fact the kids did not experience the entire curriculum leading into that 21 assessment. Each grade level had limited access when we left school in March 20, and then continued academic disruption all the way into early 21. High school numbers include only 19 and 21. Remember they switched tests, so they're only comparing 2019 and 21. A number of students took the tests at home. A number of students were involved in the remote program, the Apple program, that was a different curriculum than what we followed within the district. And then you'll see a decline of the scores, most noticeable in mathematics. So it's kind of a quick comparison of some of the issues and things that we're working on. I'll try to explain along the way. In grade 3, when you think about it, these kids missed first and second grade, basically disrupting both of those grades along the way. We're aware of all of the concepts that they missed when we first shut down. But in grade 3, we do see a stable outcome for ELA and a large increase in math assessment results of a 19 percentage point slide in the number of students not meeting expectations. Some third graders did not experience the adopted investigations curriculum. They were using the online system, they were in the Apple program, and the order of units was different. So ours may have followed one sequence and the Apple program was following another sequence. In grade 4, you start to see the similar effect. You'll see this actually right across all of the grade levels. You see a 5 percentage point increase in ELA and exceeding expectations categories. Pretty interesting. Clearly a shift in math between 19 and 21, but nothing unexpected. And then these students never had previously taken MCAS. Usually students would take MCAS in third grade for the first time. It's usually the first time that they see the actual test, whether it's online or in class. It's the first time they get to use tools related to the assessments. So it's hard to compare their performance in the past because they had no third grade assessment. So this is really the first round for this group of kids. Grade 5, ELA scores were stable, and they closely resemble the same scores, the scores from the same students when they were in grade 3, and I'll show you that in a second. Math showed a slight percentage point drop, including a higher percentage of students in the partially meeting expectations category. In the next slide, I took out the information related to the 5th grade, and I went back and pulled their 3rd grade information. So unlike the comparisons you see in this slide, these are different groups of kids being compared. So in my own opinion, statistically not accurate way to do it. In fact, on the 21 version, there were very different tests, not even complete versions of the test. So we're comparing apples to grapes and bicycle tires. This is a look at one group of kids from 3rd grade through 5th grade with the hole in the middle of that 20 exam not being taken. Not too bad when you start to look at the overall comparisons. You're still seeing the drop in math. We know that these kids missed segments of their math instruction along the way. So you're seeing that. The one thing that I find interesting is you're looking at scores in the ELA category. Again, they're very similar. They don't change so dramatically. So it's kind of an interesting phenomenon. Most of the shifts we see are in mathematics.
But you could easily attribute that to the fact that parents read to their kids and they read at home,
Sure.
and they probably aren't doing math at home with them.
Right.
So during the pandemic, you can easily get ELA instruction from your surroundings
Right.
and not necessarily math.
You're still reading, you're still writing,
Right.
you're not necessarily going through your math work.
You're not adding fractions. Yeah, no, yeah.
Grade 6, similar thing, ELA stable, and then you see a 6 percentage point shift in mathematics from exceeding expectations to meeting expectations, and then again, partially meeting expectations, so that it's kind of a downward slide, not unexpected. There's also a 3 percentage point increase in the not meeting expectations category. The data below, this is where the arrow is. Your presentation is different. There was a wrong chart that was noted by someone in the community this afternoon, so the chart that's in there is the correct one. The graph is correct. The bottom information is the 5th grade data. So this is the correct data and the correct chart. So on yours, the ELA chart at the top is correct, but the numbers down at the bottom are the different one.
Okay.
I was wondering why I wrote myself that note. Grade 7. In grade 7, ELA, a 9 percentage point increase in meeting expectations. And in math, an 8 percentage point increase in partially meeting expectations. Kind of interesting, not a huge difference, but again, we're comparing apples and oranges here. And then in grade 8, the ELA, a 9 percentage point drop in exceeding expectations, and a 9 percentage point increase in meeting expectations. So they're just sliding backwards. And then math, a 10% point increase in partially meeting expectations. So really the slides, you can see they're pretty even across the different groups of kids. In grade 10, there we go. Grade 10, the overall percentage of students exceeding expectations in ELA and math increased. The largest slide was math in the partially meeting expectations category, which was 13 percentage points difference between 19 and 21. Again, 2 different groups of kids, not the same groups of kids to compare, but this is how the Department of Education shows their data. So what are our responses? We've had a number of conversations, especially at the elementary level, given the work we're doing at literacy, also including work with mathematics. Our primary focus from the start of the school year has been on social emotional needs of kids. And that will continue through this school year. Strong relationships, making connections, checking in with kids and checking in with families where we need to. The current focus is on bolstering foundational literacy and math skills. We are asking teachers to give kids regular access to grade level work. If you go back to the acceleration information that the state put out at the beginning of the year, that one of their recommendations was not to lean back and go back to things that weren't done. It was to stay with grade level work and then supplement where you needed to, and we're seeing that with mathematics at the elementary level. And then continuously monitoring student growth. So we're doing that through assessment all along the way. And then focusing on instruction via learning walks and administrator evaluation. So we started our learning walks. We scheduled learning walks from now through, I think, April. I have no idea. I think it's about April now. But we're really doing purposeful learning walks focused on instruction at each of the schools, at least twice a month at each school outside of our regular visits that are specific to taking a look at instruction and what's happened instructionally at the ground level. And then, data teams are feeding back to teachers at the elementary level and looking at data across all of the spectrum of literacy and math, not just literacy. I know there's a very big focus on literacy. And that's about it. I will take any questions if you have.
Michelle?
I have 2 questions. One is, there isn't any information here that compares this to the state. So in isolation, we don't really know how we compared to the state. So that was one thing.
Yep.
And the other question is, what are we doing to monitor how kids are doing so that we can project what their scores may be, and then comparing that projection to what it actually is.
You talking about projecting MCAS scores?
Yeah.
I don't know that we necessarily would project MCAS scores. I know we do have a robust assessment system along the tiers of each grade level, and then especially K to 5, really well-timed responses for kids when they are either showing signs of not understanding concepts or sliding backwards. But I'm not sure that teachers would try to guess what kids would get on an MCAS test in say...
Not the score itself, but whether or not they're going to be proficient, exceeding proficient, not proficient.
Yeah, I think
yes or no.
I think what you see is if we continue to stay with grade level instruction, with scaffolding where needed, when needed. We've also looked at provisioning of classrooms and programs. We found early in the year that some of the classrooms and the programs did not have the same provisions, so we were able to shift provisions into the hands of people that truly needed them, that had not had them along the way. So I think, I would guess you'll see a bounce back in our scores. And to answer your question against the state dropped in more than we did when you look at the overall number. So we're still kind of ahead of the state, but they had some bigger drops. They're dealing with many different cities, so.
I just think that would have been a good story to tell, that even though we do have this drop, that maybe it wasn't as significant as the state.
Yeah.
So.
It's definitely not as significant as the state. And I think what you'll see as each of the grade levels, I mean, you can go all the way up through high school when teachers are having conversations. You know, as a former high school principal, I remember having conversations with teachers about algebra, about the disconnects that kids had as they came up from 8th grade to 9th grade. So those types of conversations are had at the school levels as well. And I think it's a good opportunity to be able to take this year and then kind of see that next round of assessments and see where we went. I think you have a number of barometers. You have the MCAS assessment, which you know, either here or there does give us some information. And then you have also the assessments that we're doing along the way that we'll be able to kind of gauge and judge where kids will be. I mean, generally, when it counts, our kids do well. We all know that. When it counts in 10th grade, our kids do really well. We have very few kids that need to remediate in MCAS, so.
Okay. Other questions? Anna?
Given that we're seeing such a significant drop-off in our math performance coming out of the pandemic, we're spending so much time on the MTSS system. We're talking about literacy. I mean, every meeting we spend a lot of time talking about that. Is there any notion that we need to build into our budget some additional support for math support, math intervention? Because it seems like the literacy, the program is going and we think it's doing well. We know the pandemic, as Michelle said, is a little easier on the ELA side of the coin. Do we need to actually think about more intervention for math specialists at the elementary level?
So the dilemma we're running into right now is hiring. We have 4 math tutor positions that are open. The reality is the teachers are working hard to teach the grade level, remediate where necessary, scaffold where necessary. And I think I think you'll see that math's not as much of a worry for us as it may look on the slide set. Again, you're comparing different groups of kids, so it's hard to say how one group performed versus the other, because the test in 21 is dramatically different. I mean, one of the things we know for a fact is 3rd graders didn't have fractions. They really didn't get to fractions by the time everything kind of fell apart. And it shows. When you go down to the question level and you start to hone in on each of the questions and the types of questions, those are the questions that pop out as didn't get it, or low score. So we know where the deficits are. It's just a matter of getting kids back in the mode. And I think it's important that we're in school every day. Every day we're in school and kids are working towards goals that they couldn't strive for in the past 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Did you say that we have 4 vacant math tutor positions?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oof. Is there something that we can do to try to make that better? Can we increase the pay?
Grow math teachers.
Yeah, grow math teachers.
Have we thought about reaching out? I mean, I'm sure you've thought of everything, but I mean, that's,
They usually come from Gordon and Endicott and.
Yeah.
yeah.
They're part-time positions, so it's hard to fill part-time positions. They don't, they don't necessarily carry benefits. And the bigger pieces, I mean, that's only a few of the positions that we're trying to hire. And
Right.
that's
No, I
happening
know it's
everywhere. There's
yeah.
really a huge deficit in school-level personnel for support, for tutorial, for, anything support level, TA, tutorial, or even, people that are doing remediation. You can't get them right now.
So can I ask the elephant in the room question on that? Last year, we made the shift to going towards more of those TA positions. We rejiggered our budget and sort of took out the full-time specialist positions and said we're going to backfill with TAs. But now if we're not able to backfill with TAs, does that reveal a longer-term deficiency, or is this a pandemic problem? Because I think if we're a district that's structured a program that's reliant on TAs, and then we're not able to hire the TAs at all, do we need to revisit that idea at some point in terms of a staffing problem?
Yeah, the TAs that aren't in place tend to be in our programs. So our TLC program, those are people that we're hiring. So in one program, we know we have 3 spots. We're missing 1 person out of 3. Those tend to be the hardest positions. Those are, not very glamorous, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I think it's harder for principals to fill those positions versus the literacy tutors. Those positions are in place. So the bigger piece is, given what we've built, don't break it apart yet.
Mm-hmm.
We really believe this will come together, and I think we'll be able to show that by the time we get through this school year with the data that we'll collect across the year, and then the final results.
But would it be accurate to say that at present, the new model that we built isn't fully staffed?
No.
So it's not we're not even in 5th gear yet. We're still in 2nd or 3rd gear in terms of
So the
getting up
literacy
to it.
positions are
Fully
filled.
staffed.
Am I saying something wrong? No. All literacy positions are filled.
Okay.
The positions that we're trying to fill are generally support positions.
Okay.
Other questions? Michelle Horgan?
I just want to say I'm thankful that you are focusing on the social aspect of our students. As what you're saying, day in, day out, constant reinforcement of the skills will bring the kids back up to speed. So I'm confident that we will be back where we were prior to the pandemic. So thank you.
I think you also have to keep in mind that teachers spent the first 6 weeks of school teaching kids how to be back in school. Mm-hmm. And that's still doing that. Like we can go to any school and see some of that dysregulation even now, and the work that's been done is incredible. I've been fortunate to kind of watch this one kindergarten group grow along the way, and they've kind of gone from this to, all right, we start to understand how to be in school, because in some ways, kindergarten kids were not in school during the pandemic, and then boom, here you go, you're in. So learning to be in school and how to go to school and act in school has really been a pretty good chunk of what teachers have been, really stressed out about, because they want to teach and get to all these other things, but they're trying to also deal with the dysregulation. And I think they've done a fantastic job at really trying to reel some of that in.
Okay. All right, anybody else? Okay. Thank you very much for that. Eric, I think you're up again. I don't know if you're staying up there, or are you coming to sit down to talk about your entry plan?
I can sit for that one. It was probably 4 meetings ago, I think, when we were talking about my goals and really trying to build and really putting the cart before the horse, if you will. If I had started in July, or even August, the superintendent's entry plan would have come first. starting on October 1st, really put me in this position of getting goals out there first so that there was some time to do the measure and scale those goals. So superintendent's entry plan is coming a little bit backwards, but it's still, I wanted you to see it and understand that it's fully connected to my goals and the goal structures of the district as well. There are a number of opportunities for me to be able to explain some of the things I'm doing, including some of the groups I'm meeting with, what I believe in about education, and some of the stages I think we'll see along this school year, and then bring it down to what I call execution. And for me, execution is really my priority, to be able to execute the things that we've set our goals for, to be able to execute my responsibilities as the leader in the district, and also to be able to produce all of the documents that you see at the end. The entry plan, which you have, the portrait of graduate, which is in progress, and then the evidence of multi-phases, initial phases of the MTSS, which is in progress. The full equity audit, which has just been launched. The review and update of mission and vision in our school district, that'll happen during the strategic planning growth process. Development of the core beliefs and values, we'll look at what we have and decide if that's where we want to be based on the portrait of the graduate work, which will be the foundational competencies of what we're really trying to work towards. And then at taking all of this information and building it into the strategic plan, and we'll decide whether it be a 3 or 5, whatever makes sense for us at that time. In January, I'll release a very in-depth report of the state of our schools related to facilities. I think that's an important piece of our, again, future puzzle. And then I'll do just a final report on the things that I found in my entry, kind of in my entry process. And that could be things that I've learned in schools, by going to schools. As you know, I'm in schools just about every day, in some way, shape, or form. And it's important to the process, and I think working with the leadership team and their commitment in their buildings and what they're doing with their teachers, and trying to get teachers resources and those types of things are all part of this plan. And then we'll report out about that along the way. So some of this will become evidence in my evaluation as part of the goal process, and then some of it will be informational that will inform our future planning. I think it's important to be able to build kind of the bigger picture, like some of the things related to population decline over time, what that looks like, what our comparisons are, what our possible projections look like. So those types of things will be included in this. So we'll have a really strong base of information to make decisions on.
Thank you. I appreciate your work on this. I hope, I hope that members of the committee have had the opportunity, in my opinion, that this plan that you've presented is a great opportunity as a jumping off point for committee members when we have those individual meetings with you to have good conversations about, vision and where you see the district moving and the specifics. So does anyone have any, first of all, I hope that you've had that opportunity to do that already with the superintendent. If not, I encourage you to do that. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask regarding the plan? Michelle?
Yeah, so, so I would have assumed that part of the entry plan would have included individual conversations with the committee. So is that to come, or?
Individual?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we basically have them weekly, but certainly if there are other levels of opportunity, I would certainly take that too.
I would say I don't feel like we have been invited to have that conversation with you.
Outside of our weekly meetings, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, with every superintendent, including Michael Harvey, before I was a school committee member, like, I met with them. We probably had a 35 to 40-minute conversation.
Sure.
It's part of the entry plan. So, do you feel that's already happened, or is that yet to come?
No, it's yet to come.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you look in the plan, it kind of lists all of the groups.
Yeah.
It's part of chiefs of police, chiefs of fire, town administrator, town FinCom people. So we're actually in that process now. But yes, it's part of the big picture, if you will.
And then, could you explain, in italics, in the stage 3, you've got creating schools that thrive, a blueprint for strategy. Is that like a book, or is it like, what is that?
So that's a book
Okay.
that I use as a basis for developing strategic planning.
Okay.
So if you go back a couple of meetings where we talked about the lack of financing or funding for bring in consultants to do that work, I will do that work as part of, my position. I mean, really, I should do it. And that's the basis of what I would use. It's an author and a book that's respected internationally, and she's actually local, so we can reach out to her and get information when we do need it, so.
Okay.
Okay. Julia, did you have something?
No.
Nope. Anna, and then I'm not sure, David, whether you were waving too. Yeah,
Oh, no. When
Okay.
you said the name of the book, I knew it sounded familiar.
Okay. Anna?
I think I don't really have a question other than I too sort of, when we tend to talk, we tend to be very focused on like the agenda and what's happening next. So I also kind of echo that it'd be nice to take a step back and have this sort of bigger visioning conversation individually. So
Yep.
I think it's good. And I like the way you framed it in those 5 questions. What's the story? What are we doing well? I think what I like about what you've done is that's a very open-ended section where you're not really putting direction one way or the other. But in other places, I just want to be clear that I really appreciate some candor that you've put into this document. And there are certain key phrases that I think express a strong statement of value, but also are kind of putting a line in the sand in a really good way. You're talking about actually healing the wounds of last year and acknowledging that wounds exist and need healing and what that means. I think that's really important. And I love, that you've highlighted equity. And I love that you actually talked about, our journey toward being an anti-racist school system.
Mm-hmm.
That's a strong, strong statement that doesn't hold back. And so I think it's really good that you frame things openly, but you're also really showing us a little bit of who you are and who you want us to, who you think we ought to be, and are candid about it. So I really appreciate that. And I look forward to reading all these reports, man. A report on a report on a report.
Okay. Anybody else?
So can I
Yep,
clarify
Eric?
one thing? The 5 questions are really central of conversations that I would have with each of you, but also have with town, elected officials, students, student groups, parent groups. I'm working with the district parent council on those questions right now. So they've been kind enough to answer them, and just kind of collecting data. So all of that will kind of come out in the end to say, here are some things that people have identified, and here are some things that we're doing really well. Here are some things where people think we're falling short in the bigger picture of, again, who do we want to be as a school system? So I want to be able to tell the story that I want to be able to give the story to the real estate agents, to say, here is our district and here is who we are, rather than them creating the story for us. So.
Thank you very much. Okay, next up, we have the principal's budget presentation.
I was just going to say, it sounds like a video game or a casino, like a slot machine. Do you hear
Driving
it?
me crazy. It's like,
Do you hear it?
yeah.
Yeah, it
That
sounds
Matt.
like thunder or something. It's
What's up,
weird.
man?
Oh, God, I can't unhear it.
I think the metal is rattling.
Oh, fuck, it sounds
duck down. I don't know. You guys way. I like duck down. To really duck down.
Okay.
Your guys.
Oh, no, I keep
All right, whenever you're ready, we're just coming. Go
Having
ahead.
fun, okay, good. All right, so I have the pleasure of opening this up. Here are the principals' budget proposals at the school level for FY23.
And I will just say, Brian, I can hear you, but it could be just a little bit louder. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so at the high school, what are some of the cool things that we really want to talk about that are going on right now? First of all, we're back in school and we're happy to be here. It's been great to see all the students and all the teachers on campus all at once. It's been great to see learning return to the collaborative pathways that we've carved out over a number of years, seeing kids facing each other, having conversations in English and history class and in math class, have kids in science classes back in the lab, kids in world language classes having conversations with each other. So that's been exciting, and it feels right, and the routine is good. It hasn't been without challenges, like Mr. Tracy talked about earlier. Even high school kids had to relearn how to go to school, believe it or not. And we also have to remember that we have kids who are new to the high school whose last time that they were really full-time students, a full year of school was 6th grade almost. So it's been an interesting transition, but we're happy that we're all back. I'd like to say that we're very proud of our students who have received national merit recognition. We have 4 commended scholars and 1 student who actually made it to the national merit semifinalist round. So that's pretty cool. And that's really the result of lots and lots of years of hard work and having good, strong, engaging relationships with teachers. We really have 6 fall sports advancing to tournament play. And that's been really, really fun. It was a great community building event at the high school. The kids really got behind it. And certainly every team was able to make its run. We had 2 teams make it to the Sweet 16, the new statewide tournament format. We had 2 teams make it to the Elite 8. We had our cross-country team making the all-state competition, and certainly what the girls did, the girls soccer team was really special. That doesn't happen often, and that was another great community building event for our school. And being at that state final game, and sitting behind the team actually, and being able to watch the crowd and how they really lifted us up, that was cool. And we actually, I was contacted by the Cohasset principal, and he pointed out our student section and how great they were during that game, how positive they were, and how he was just really proud to be a part of that competition. So that was really special. What else have we done this year? We have additional reading support at the high school. We're sharing a reading specialist with the middle school, and that's allowed us to enhance our language-based program, because now we're not using language-based staff necessarily on a piecemeal basis to attend to reading services that are in the IEP. Rather, we have a dedicated reading person who can come in, work with students, and the staff in our language-based program can attend to their other duties with more focus. We're also happy with our 9th grade transition support this year. The first thing is we now have a dedicated 9th grade counselor, Matt Fitzgibbons, who previously just had a regular student load, has now shifted to all of the 9th grade students. And what that has allowed for is for him to develop close relationships with the students and with the parents as well. And that's been an important step in terms of bringing the kids back to school. We also put together a 9th grade common planning time team. And so we have teachers from each department who have 9th grade students in their classes are able to meet every other week to talk about students, how they're faring in the classroom, how they feel that they're doing on a social, emotional level, and we can put together solutions for kids who are having problems. And finally, we're looking forward to our NEASC visit in the spring of '22. And this is the visit where they actually determine our accreditation status. And that's going to be based upon our response to the priority areas that were outlined in the report that came from the visit that took place in 2019. So we have a lot of work cut out for us this year in terms of NEASC, and we've already started that process. We had our opening webinar with NEASC. I've been in contact with our NEASC representative, and we've now begun the process of meeting weekly internally to help plan for the visit that will take place in March. So that's what's going on so far this year, in addition to the other 8 million things that Chris highlighted at the start of the meeting. High school is a busy place, and this is supposed to be a quiet time of year. We were happy to be busy in the fall because it meant that our teams were doing well. And as we turn the corner into the holiday time here, it will get busier, and then it'll be kind of quiet towards the middle of the year, and then all of a sudden the roof blows off the place in the spring. So it's going to come fast. What are we looking for next year? How can we enhance our program at the high school? I think every school recognizes the fact that our students have some real social, emotional needs. I think we need to recognize the fact that I think we've all been injured on some level by this pandemic. And in particular, our students and their adolescent development, that injury, I think has maybe set them a little bit off course in terms of how they're going to make progress in school. So we need to address some of those social emotional needs. And we feel that the addition of a shared middle school, high school social worker will help us support some of the social emotional growth that we need to have happen. The nice thing about sharing somebody at the middle school, high school level is that we can look at partnering around the 8th to 9th grade year and help with that transition as they walk through those red doors between the middle school and high school. Also, we would like to enhance our support for the 9th grade transition. Hopefully you can see that that's a theme, because we feel that by enhancing it, we can sustain it throughout the entire school year, so that way when they come in as 8th graders plus 1 day to the end of their 9th grade year, we can help make sure we're keeping them on track. The second area that we want to look at enhancements for next year would be the addition of a teaching assistant for our life skills program. And the reason for that is that we've started to add more students to the program, but they come in with very specific profiles, specific needs, and opportunities that we have to extend to them. And so with the addition of more students, we've really kind of expanded the scheduling needs across the day, and at this point we're really in need of an additional teaching assistant for that program. Now this is, I believe, more of a budget neutral thing. It's going to be a staffing shift from another building, but we just wanted to highlight that that would be an enhancement for next year. So what are our unmet needs? Well, there are many. I chose to truncate the list here, but there's a lot under each bullet point. If you come to the high school and middle school in the afternoon, you can participate in the comedy that is me listening to Mr. Hovey's announcements in part of the high school, and perhaps him listening to high school announcements in part of the middle school. That's because our intercom system is a wee bit outdated, I should say, and we're definitely in need of an upgrade of that for communication purposes, and it's certainly nice to get information out during the school day, but this can also have safety implications as well when we're trying to communicate information that needs to get out quickly. Science lab upgrades. Our science labs are outdated, and I can say that. Last year I had the pleasure of teaching a course and had to work in science labs every day, and they definitely need some fixing. My previous 2 stops before here, I was working in brand new buildings, was able to work in brand new science classrooms, and it's not even the same experience. When you have a well built out, roomy, accessible science classroom, it makes for a much more enriching experience for students. The auditorium electrical upgrade, that's something that's been a need year over year over year. We really need to address that. The consistent roof leaks, if you would like to come by when it's raining out or we've had a significant snowfall, I mean, it's kind of cool, the shower effect, but it's ultimately not what we really want happening in the school on a daily basis. And then finally, our athletics facility upgrades. You know, if you came by the stadium at the end of the season, after all of those regular season games had been played, and then at tournament time to look at the condition of the field, it really was almost unplayable at some point, and you could see that it impacted parts of the competition where kids would fall down in certain areas of the field because there's just nothing left to it. And also, you know, during some of the state tournament games where we had to go to another facility to complete our home games, the home games that our student athletes had earned, to have to step off of campus to do that, that definitely is not a point of pride for us. And I know that there's a lot of work underway with respect to upgrading the athletics facilities, and hopefully that's something that the community can continue to push forward on. So I think Mr. Hovey is up next.
Can we ask questions for each principal versus, or are we going to hear the whole thing and then ask questions?
I'm flexible. I was imagining going through all of them, but if we want, are you all okay with that?
Go by section.
Yeah, we can do that. Okay. Do you have a question, I assume, Michelle?
I do.
Go ahead.
Sustained support for ninth grade transition. Does this mean that this is something we have and it would be a level service, or does this mean this is something that is a plus in the budget?
This would be a plus in the budget in that at the beginning of the year, we work with an outside group to come in and train our student mentors who are part of the ninth grade transition program. What we would like to do is to bring in this outside group throughout the school year to work directly with the ninth grade students themselves. So that would be an enhancement.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else have a question?
And the intercom system, you mentioned potentially could be a safety issue?
Correct.
And so can I ask why it's not on a list of potential capital needs?
I think because of what you maybe had just said in that it's a capital need. I mean, a lot of this, you know, the athletics facility upgrades, that's not something I would love to be able to say that we should build a new athletic facility, but I think that's something that Tom Geary might speak to more closely in his presentation.
Okay. So you're focusing on operational budget type
Correct,
things?
yes.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
okay.
But I did want to highlight the fact that that's something that, you know, we notice every day in the high school. And Mr. Hovey probably notices it too in the middle school as well.
Anyone else? Michelle Hogan? No?
Well, Anna was first.
Oh, Anna, sorry.
I want to provide strong support, and I love seeing the social worker there. Like, I think that's overdue and awesome. Go back to the unmet needs page, though. I am struck by the fact, maybe like Michelle, those are all capital needs, and I don't see that as a deficiency in what you're presenting, but I'm looking at this list and listening to you talk about the classrooms and the spaces, and I don't know how much we can build into the current budget. I know I do know, having looked ahead, there is some maintenance budget we're going to allocate from the E&D, but as a taxpayer and as a parent in this district, it continues to alarm me that we subject our students and our staff to a building that literally, if that was happening in our houses, we would fix all of that right away. We would not let it happen, and yet it's happening in the school buildings right now. So I guess I just want to say, like, we as a committee need to, I feel like the facility issues they're just this massive elephant that we need to really focus on, because it's interesting that you talk about the science labs, and we talk about future thinking, and especially in this part of the country, Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, like the biomedical industry is such a huge driver economically. There's so many people in our community that have a science background. We've got New England Biolabs here. We've got Dr. Carr sitting right here on the committee. I mean, the number of people that have science in some form of it. So part of me wonders when you had mentioned talking about like why are kids leaving the district? Why are we losing kids at the high school level? I mean, at some point I wonder if some of these facility issues on a curriculum level, if you can go someplace where you have a science lab that's state of the art and you know what it looks like because you have parents who work in the industry who are telling you, wow, that 1970s dinosaur of a science lab at the high school is just really outdated. I just feel like we as a committee need to really pay close attention to this list. And not that it really makes you feel better, but I'm really sorry that you have to work in a building where the roof leaks all the time and the intercom doesn't work. And as the employer of everyone here, like, if this was a different industry, I mean, if this was my office building, people would be up in arms. And I just think we need to recognize we have an obligation to meet the student needs better and the staff needs better and provide a safe sanitary workspace. And that to me does not look like a safe sanitary workspace. So just wanted to make that point.
I would want to highlight that, there are consistent roof leaks happening. They're patched, but as we patch them, it doesn't make the roof any younger, I guess. So it's an issue that will have to be addressed.
Thank you. Eric, do you want to respond to that, or do we have a question?
I just want people to know that we have just put $10,000 into just repairing parts of the high school roof this year alone. And the unfortunate reality is the more you walk on it, the more holes you create. So the guys that go up, or gals who go up to fix it, also may create more issues. Tom did submit the SOI to the MSBA for the roofing project. As you know, we were denied. We'll continue to put that in. So that's definitely on the forefront of our thinking. It's having been in that school and knowing what will come out of NEASC, it's got to be a priority.
Mm-hmm. Well, and my comments are not in any way like a criticism directed to Tom or you or anyone working on the roof, but like it's a district fail. I mean, to me, it feels like a collective failure that we're having this inability to make our facilities what they should be for modern learning. So I know that we've put in for it. I just wonder at some point if we're not going to get funded by the state, like we have an obligation, regardless of what the state does, to keep our buildings up, maintained. So,
okay. Do you have a question about the presentation? Go ahead.
I would recommend that somebody approach Fisher Scientific. They're really looking to make an impact on the North Shore. They just gave like a huge amount of equipment to Salem State University. I mean, like ridiculously amazing equipment that we never could have afforded. And I definitely think, reaching out to New England Biolabs and companies like Fisher who are trying to make impacts on the community would be a really positive step, particularly for the sciences. They really want to help.
I think the issue is the building more than the equipment. The labs are small, so you can't put more stuff in to a small lab because you need the space for the students to work.
Yeah, it's the science lab thing is, having new equipment is great. It's also just the physical layout of the rooms, the size. An important thing for me is accessibility. If you had a student in a wheelchair, I can't say that they'd be able to access those labs. Also, the prep area in there, I think, is not what it needs to be as well. And it just doesn't really allow for some of that collaborative work that you would want to have happen between the teachers. So, it's an old building, and they tried to retrofit it during the renovation, but the building still is put together in the early 60s.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Harvey.
All right, good to see you back here again. So at the middle school, we've also, I'll echo a lot of what Brian just said. We are thrilled to be back in person. The energy is amazing. Teachers and kids interacting is phenomenal. I did a walkthrough yesterday with Mr. Tracy. saw some great things going on in our classrooms. Focusing a little bit on the budget and what we sort of got back this year after a pretty tough hit last year was the reestablishment of our team model. This has made a world of difference in supporting our students as we work our way through this pandemic. We've seen that not only are students more supported, but we're able to better support families, and our staff are better able to work and collaborate and support each other. That was one of the pieces of information that sort of came out recently when we reached out to our staff, is just that loss of connection over the last year with each other and their colleagues. We were able to return 6th grade world language this year, which is wonderful. Again, a great addition to our school. We are, as Brian mentioned, we're sharing a reading specialist with the middle and high school, so our reading groups are smaller, more functional, and more flexible. Some of this may actually be money that has come out of pandemic relief money, or the ESSER money, rather than what was budgeted, so pardon my mixing here. But we are now one-to-one for all students. All of our 6th graders are using Chromebooks, all of our 7th and 8th graders have iPads, and that has helped transform our teaching and learning. We've sort of been able to roll that out as devices were procured this year. The front of the building, you're all welcome to stop by any time, but if you come by, you will not be tripping over anything as you enter the building. It's a much safer, cleaner, smoother concrete, which is, in addition to being safer to walk across, has made an outstanding surface for our students to eat lunch at. Kids really do enjoy eating out there. We have Adirondack chairs. We have a lot of kids who just choose to sit on the ground because they're kids and they like that. And that's the expansion of outdoor dining and learning. We had the tents in the fall. We don't have tents at the moment, but kids are, despite the temperatures, still really enjoying eating outside. And that's one of those design shifts that we are going to continue with, is just opening those doors and letting kids eat outside. So a lot of great things are going on at the school, outstanding energy. We have several, the budget does allow for a large number of clubs that are interest-based. We have some new clubs this year. We have an improv club, so some student improv going on. And we also have a mountain bike club, which is a really fun thing to watch. So great things. We have our winter concert coming up in 2 weeks. I'm thrilled for that. So, come on down. We'll have a special guest there for the concert as well. Surprise special guest. This year, this current budget, and I know we're still early in the budget phase, will help us expand our social emotional supports for our students. So as Brian also mentioned, we're looking to add a shared middle school, high school counselor, social worker with the middle school and the high school. We have been incredibly fortunate this year that we have had a full-time guidance intern, or counselor intern this year, who has just been outstanding and has really helped us keep our head above water with our student supports. This is not something that we have had in the past, and what it's allowing is for our counselors to be more proactive in connecting with families and students and stretching forward rather than being completely reactive with all of the pandemic-related work that needs to be done. So the addition of a middle school, high school counselor, social worker will help with being proactive in some educational pieces, as well as with that 8 to 9 transition. It's going to be instrumental. We're also looking at getting some funding, fairly small amount of funding, to support develop a middle school RISE program, similar to what's at the high school, but this would more be for training and some outside supports. I don't know that we're going to be looking at adding any full-time staffing members, but there's a lot of discussions that still need to look at how that's going to work. And then training and support for our 8th grade mentors, but in a little bit of a different format than we were thinking for the 9th grade. So rather than having an outside group come and train the mentors, we would have some supports and professional development for our 2 H2O coordinators to help them get better at training our 8th grade mentors. Supporting all learners, we're going to need to add an additional language-based special education teacher. We have a pod of language-based students that are coming up to us next year, and I'm sure Stacy will talk a little bit more about what that looks like. That may be a reallocation. And then we may or may not need an additional TA for our ILAS program. In some conversations with Stacy since these slides were submitted, that seems to be a changing factor, so I'm sure she'll have more specifics for you when she presents, I think, in January. And we have moved to some online social studies textbooks and resources. Prior to the pandemic, we were using some pretty old ones that had some countries that no one has used in a while. So these are online, current, and with the iPads and Chromebooks, very accessible to our students, and the funding would allow us to sustain those resources. For world language, we may need to add a part-time world language teacher. There is a number of moving pieces that will help us determine that, and those would be sort of who is going to take over the curriculum leader position next year, whether it's a Mandarin teacher or Spanish teacher, whether they're at the high school or the middle school, as well as what we're looking for 7th grade Mandarin enrollment. So we don't have all that information at this time. So that's still a bit of a moving target. Some of our unmet needs that aren't in this budget, again, as Brian mentioned, upgrading the middle school, high school intercom system. There's a pretty big overlap zone around the library and that whole art hallway. And then depending on, I'm not sure if it's the weather or birds flying by or small earthquake tremors, there are periodic times where it just doesn't work in some of our larger spaces like the gym and the multipurpose room. So that is a concern of ours, and the intercom system is at least 20 years old. So upgrading it to a more modern technology would be extremely helpful. Several years ago, we converted the middle school computer lab adjacent to the library into our collaboratory, and that has been a highly successful makerspace for the middle school and high school, but it does lack some basic needs, such as any sort of water or drains. So, if there is painting to be done or any of that stuff, it's all done with buckets right now, and that's just not where we want to be. So I'd really like us to move forward that way. I didn't put it in here, but upgraded ventilation might not be a bad idea either. Replacing our art and science tables. During the pandemic, we realized the condition of our art and science tables was pretty bad. That when they were originally put into the buildings, they didn't really consider the size of the large tables and the size of the small doorways. So every time the custodians had to remove them to clean the floors, they would have to physically lift these extremely heavy tables, which did, I think, over the years led to a few injuries, but also stressed those tables quite a bit and caused some damage. So, during the pandemic shuffle of desks, our move to individual desks, those tables were assessed and are no longer in use. So we are currently using 2-person student desks in our art and science classrooms, which are functional in a lot of ways, but not ideal. And then this is one that I keep putting on there. It's not a critical need, but it's, I think, a high leverage potential, is our performing arts room, or what is often known as the band room, is not built for what we use it for or what we could use that space for. So if you've ever been in there, there are risers built into the band room. No band performs on risers. The risers are not deep enough to put a chair with a student and a music stand, so you have to use 2 risers. Whoops. And it is, aside from the gym and the cafeteria, it is our largest indoor space, and it's vastly underused. I would just roughly guess it's about half the size of this room. So if we were able to remove those risers and do some basic renovations, depending on what's under them, we would have a very large, flexible space for meetings and gatherings. So that's something I'd like to explore. So it's not something I typically put in the budget, but it's something that I'd really like to explore if the funds are available. So that that's kind of what I have in a nutshell.
Thank you.
Happy to take any
All
questions.
right, yep. Does anyone have a question? Julia?
I just have a comment. I really like what you said about the budget and some of the things in it being more proactive rather than reactive. And what I like about what I'm seeing is just this, what seems to be a consistent theme of trying to be proactive and get ahead of students' needs rather than react so much as we've been doing. So I just think it's a great theme that I've been seeing. So not a question, just a comment.
Thank you.
Okay, David?
This goes for, I'm going to say it here, but it really goes for everyone else. I'd love to see some numbers for these unmet needs.
Yes.
Do we know how much the intercom system fix will be?
I don't off the top of my head, but I would imagine Tom Geary probably has a ballpark idea or would be able to get that for you. Not to assign him work, but.
Definitely upwards of 20 to 30,000, that's for sure.
Yeah.
If not more.
Only that?
Say it again?
Only that?
I couldn't.
Only that? Only 20 or 30,000?
Oh, no, I'm sure it's probably more. That's like my
Yeah.
low ball
Ah.
estimate.
Yeah.
That's what I'm wondering. Are there some of these that are?
Yeah, could we pick some of these off the top if, I mean,
So I'm just gonna, not that it's
not to derail, I'm just asking.
I'm just mindful of the time and the things that we have to do tonight. So I hear David's, I actually like the nice concise way that you said that you'd like to see some numbers on some of these. But I don't think we're gonna solve it right now while we're sitting here. So. Okay.
Just to add one more piece about the shortcomings of that intercom system is, to my knowledge, and I may be incorrect here, the only access points for it are in the offices. You cannot access the intercom system from a classroom if you needed to do that in an emergency. And if anybody knows differently, I'm happy to be corrected.
The intercom system this year.
Any other questions? Michelle?
So this is actually probably a question to Vinny. So where we have this, like, an addition of a middle school, high school social worker, were those things built into the budget when you made the so this isn't necessarily an addition to what we've seen. This is an explanation of what's in that budget.
Correct. The social worker was already included in what we presented last week. Yep.
Great, thank you.
All right, anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, and next up we have our elementary school presentation.
All right, so I am going to start us off. And I will talk a little bit about what we have going on with our current budget, some highlights from this year. So with our current budget, we're able to maintain 40 classrooms across the 3 schools, K-5. We were able to reestablish 2 classrooms that were not in place last year. We were able to consolidate 2 classroom sections last year. One was a section of 3 that came down to 2. One was a section of 2 that came down to a section of 1, based on which kids went fully remote and what those class sizes were. So all those kids have come back, which is awesome to have everybody back in school. And so those sections have been returned. So we have 40 sections going right now. As I noted, we have everybody back in school, which is great. And then our big stuff has been that elementary curriculum support, the way some of that has been brought back in and the way some of that has shifted. So we have our new Director of Elementary Teaching and Learning. Jen Clifford is helping building consistency across the levels and across the schools. And it has been huge to have that curricular support back in the system that we did not have the last couple of years. We have our district literacy intervention specialist. Again, building consistency with our literacy interventions. We've talked a lot about that model. She's been a huge resource for all of us, myself included. It's also been really nice to have someone whose job is really focusing on training the TAs. We've been asking so much more of them. And in the past, we didn't really have anybody whose job it was to get them up to speed and to train them. And so whenever that happened, it was pulling away from services to kids. And so to have somebody whose job it is to do that, to be able to grab those 9 TAs, to be able to grab our 6 kindergarten TAs, and really give them some more skills, some more capacity so that they are better equipped to work with our students, because they are working with some of our most vulnerable students. We have our district technology integration specialist. That's bringing some of that consistency again across the 3 buildings, and shuffling around that model around our library and technology, freed up some financial resources so that we were able to bring in some of the literacy and coaching support in a way that was budget neutral, coming from last year into this year. Looking at that coaching support, we have our building-based instructional coaches that are focusing on that literacy support. We are, changing up our model and changing up how we're thinking about literacy and having an additional teacher position to help teachers look at student data and target instructions where students really need it. As we come out of COVID, moving through COVID, I guess, still at this point, we've talked a lot about tonight that there are these learning gaps. And so having another teacher, another thought partner to look at student data and look at where those gaps are and where we can best support students. We have our additional literacy teaching assistants in each building. So last year we had dropped down to 1 in each building primarily. We were able to return that 1 and then add on another part-time as well. So we have more TAs than we did even pre-pandemic, which allows us to have those targeted interventions and along with progress monitoring to go with that. We are beginning to get some progress monitoring data back, and it is looking really, really awesome. I'm really excited about the data that we're beginning to get back from our new literacy support model. And finally, the instructional resources that go with this early literacy change. We are shifting to a more research-based approach to reading. The science of reading is the phrase that is kind of out there. That has been a shift of all of our professional development and will continue throughout the year. And so with that, there is this need for different kinds of resources within the building. And so our current budget has allowed us to do that and make that shift with our instruction. And Carolyn's going to talk about next year.
So in next year's budget, the first item is that we have put in a 7th kindergarten position for moving forward. This year, we currently have between 19 and 22 students in each of the 7 kindergarten classrooms. So we anticipate that we're going to need to have that 7th kindergarten again next year. And we want to keep those class sizes as low as we possibly can. Even what we have this year is feeling quite large to me. The other thing that we're going to be able to do in next year's budget is continue the momentum that we have around all of the elementary curriculum work that we're doing. We're going to use, oops, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong notes. So we're going to continue to keep that foundational literacy focus. We're going to keep this model in place and hope we keep this momentum going and see some great gains. While also reducing the number of students who need interventions, because we're hoping to start at a tier 1 level where all kids are getting really strong instruction in their classrooms, and we can reduce the number of students who need intervention. The other piece of this is that we're going to continue to refine the implementation of the MTSS structures that we're working on putting in place this year. So by next year, we're hoping to have a really strong tier 1 and tier 2 model, and then we'll look at those tier 3 supports. And right now it's focusing mostly on literacy, but we're also working on building the math MTSS structure, which was brought up earlier today because of the math tutors. And we're trying to make sure we've got that good and solid, like we're working on with the literacy, as well as social emotional MTS supports. The other piece of this is that we will continue to work on professional development for our new teachers. Ben mentioned the professional development that has been provided by the elementary literacy specialist, and so we're working on getting all of our teachers trained around the science of reading so that they're providing good tier 1 support, and we want to make sure we can keep that moving forward as we hire new teachers into the district. We don't want to forget that we need to continually train new people who might come in and then refine the trainings that we have given in the past. The other thing that this budget does is it allows us to reinstate the grade level bubble classrooms. Oops, did I just move that back? To reinstate the grade level bubble classrooms that were collapsed during COVID that we need to continue with. And is this ours? And then the
The other piece is that we are looking to increase, meet the needs of our increasing ELL population, and we're looking, I think, to add an additional EL tutor position, and I know Stacy's going to talk a little bit about that in her presentation. So some of our unmet needs, similar to what Brian and Craig were talking about, are, well, I'm going to jump down just because I thought about it, but the ongoing facilities upkeep. Our buildings are all old, as you know, built in the 1950s. Winthrop is the newest elementary school, built in 1960. So there's certainly a lot of deficits around maintaining our buildings and making them safe and dry, and we just did have somebody come and patch up all the leaks in our roof over at Winthrop, but it's an ongoing process. But back up to the top, as far as the elementary principals are concerned, I think one of our primary unmet needs is full-time kindergarten teaching assistants, and we've been asking for it year after year after year. DESE recommends a ratio in kindergarten of 18 students to 2 staff members, and right now we're at 20 students with 1.5 staff members, because our kindergarten teaching assistants at this point are paid out of a Title I grant, and it's their 0.5 position. So we've got large kindergarten classes, and we definitely feel that it would be beneficial to have full-time assistants in those classrooms. The other unmet need is some additional paid PD time for our teaching assistants. We're starting to ask more and more of our teaching assistants, and across the elementary schools, there are lots of different pockets of teaching assistants who play different roles, and they don't have the same amount of PD time or collaboration time with the teachers and the liaisons that they're working with. So we are looking to add some additional PD time for teaching assistants eventually. The next piece, again, kind of goes along with what was said about the high school and middle school, is that we really have a shortage of learning spaces in the elementary schools. We are at full capacity, that every single school is using every single space for tutorial spaces, for meeting spaces. Winthrop Stage this year is part of the literacy support space. That's where kids are getting their literacy support. So we definitely have a shortage of spaces for all of the needs that we have in the buildings. And then the last piece was the aging furniture. Last year, during COVID, when we were bringing all students back, we did get an influx of those new desks, which was great. But aside from those new desks, most of our furniture is very, very old and not in good shape and heavy, and it doesn't fit with sort of the more modern classrooms that we're trying to put in place. So that's a brief summary of our unmet needs for this year.
Thank you. Questions for the elementary schools? Michelle.
So we've heard this TA thing for many years. The last time we actually had the TAs was when my 20-year-old was in kindergarten. Can you talk about why the decision is made year over year to prioritize other things over that?
I think one of the things I left out from my notes is that to hire 7 full-time TAs, presuming they might take benefits, it would be a budget hit of about $300,000, and so I think it often gets moved to the bottom of the list.
And then what would be the impact of hiring an additional kindergarten teacher so that you actually had smaller classrooms with 8 teachers?
I don't know where I'd put them. Like, I don't know what classroom I would put that person in.
I mean, even next year, knowing we're going to have this 7th class, we are trying to be really creative about where that 7th class is going to go. And we would love an 8th class with really small kindergartens.
The tricky thing about adding an 8th section is that if we do that, does that then carry on from year to year? And because we have 3 small schools, then does it become a school where you have 3 kindergartens then condense into 2 first grades, and then you get these 2 huge classes that move up? So putting in a third kindergarten that's the same size as everyone, that bubble of 3 moves up. But when you have a situation where you have 3 kindergartens that condense to 2 or 4 that condense to 3, then it creates some other logistical problems because we're 3 small schools, not 1 really big school.
But we could alleviate that by having all kindergarten, first grade in one school, all second and third grade in another school.
Yes, if we did a big town restructure, yes.
So we have the ability to fix that.
Yes.
Other questions? Jen?
In addition to maintaining your 7 kindergarten classes, aren't you going to have to shift somebody up to go with that bubble of kindergartners that came in this year?
Yes. Yes, so next year, so Bucher took that bubble this year in kindergarten. So next year, we would anticipate having 2 kindergartens, but 3 first grades.
Okay, so you're actually reducing the number of kindergarten classes next year?
At Bucher.
At Bucher.
Yes.
But there will be a 3rd class at either Cutler or Winthrop, depending on where we can find the spacing. So right now, there are 7 sections of every grade level. Across the district, there's 7 sections of every grade level except for grade 5 and grade 3. Those are the only non-bubble grade levels. And so what we're anticipating next year is that the only non-bubble grade level next year is going to be grade 4. We're going to now have 7 sections of every other grade level, but they're distributed across the 3 schools.
Anna?
Sort of picking up the point Michelle raised and talking about the bubble, I'm assuming it's been discussed at your different years. Have we ever explored the idea of having a portable or 2 at each site? I mean, when I was in elementary school, we called it Portable City, and I think we had 10 or 15 everywhere I ever went to school. And while we're waiting for our MSBA, if we explored the budget costs of adding a portable at every building, would that help?
We have the money for it,
I was going to say, Vinny, do you want to answer that one?
It's a matter of just paying for it, the installation and purchase of the actual portables. I mean, I've done it in previous schools when I was at PBI school. We had a number of them added on during their renovation. They don't last long.
Right.
Part of the issue you're running into over at the Cutler with floors now rotting out, those were really not designed for long.
I was just going to ask, I think part of Cutler is technically a portable.
Yeah.
But again, my 25-year-old was in there.
Short-term solution. It's
but
definitely
it's a temporary
short-term
solution.
But it's we really just have to decide where we want to spend that money. And again, you're looking at what happens 3 or 4 years from now with the possibility of a new elementary school.
I mean,
maybe,
even
maybe
just in
not.
this conversation, we've talked about the intercom, the roof, the teachers, the bubble, the portable. I mean, if we really wanted to, we could have added $1 million of things just right here, sitting while talking about it, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of a portable, if we're looking at the MSBA to be replacing these, portable only has to live for a few years in essence. And I mean, Ipswich, the Winthrop has their art outside. When I went to school, art was outside in a portable. I had Algebra 2 in a portable. I mean, it's not an unreasonable thing.
I don't, maybe they're built differently. I don't remember portables. I mean, the high school I went to, there were permanent portables. Like that was, I mean, they weren't 1 or 2 years. They had been there for a decade. So anyway, Portable City, coming to you.
Keep tacking on to the old ones at Cutler.
Yeah, right.
Right. Anybody else with a question?
I don't know, maybe the portables are different. I mean, they were literally like a trailer. They weren't attached to a building. They were like something else.
Yeah, they were standalone, and they were little houses, and they were
wheel them
lovely.
in, then they connect them to power.
It's a double wide
Yeah.
trailer.
Yeah, it's a double wide trailer, yeah.
Yeah.
Can rent them out in the summer.
I mean, it's,
I'm sorry.
Put them on Airbnb over the summer.
We had school in there in
Revenue
the summer
source.
too. Yeah.
I have to remember, Michelle and I grew up in the West, where everything
Yeah.
is portable.
Everything is new and everything is portable.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, Vinnie, are you gonna, yep, okay, I was just making sure you were getting up, yep.
It's a nice light meeting.
And at the time, it was the fastest growing city in the United States. 2 years in fifth grade, 5 in elementary. And in middle school, up to fifth grade.
When did you move out here?
I've been daughter again, 5 years.
It's on the escalator again.
People are always,
It's been fun, guys.
I'm surprised you made it this long.
everything is here. I just took it like,
Oh, I'll try to make it close.
out west, everything's new.
Like,
And
you'll see where it's attached to the door frame on the top. It's a slide. The
Okay.
frame like pivots.
Yeah, right. So funny.
Good night, Chris.
You're a football player.
Good night. Good night.
No, I have to go back to
I think it needs HDMI 1 maybe.
I just love that picture so much. Her dress is so pretty. Whenever you're ready, Vinnie.
So tonight we are kind of here to wrap up our initial presentation on our FY23 budget recommendation, this time incorporating our use of E&D funds. So at the last school committee meeting, we focused on the first 3 phases of our budget, but tonight we're mainly going to focus on phase 4, which is incorporating one-time use of funds to offset E&D. So just to backpedal for a second, at the last school committee meeting, we built up our budget, which included level service. It included the addition and corrections of some grant offsets and some new investments that we had incorporated last week. With those items, you can see that overall, we had a budget gross increase of approximately 2.5 million, or roughly 6.5%. From there, you reduce your operating offsets of roughly 2.2 million to come down to a gross operating budget after offsets of roughly 3.9 million, which represents an increase of 2 million, or roughly 5.6%. From there, you reduce our total operating funding sources, which, just to call out, you can see includes the $773,000 of E&D. You take that off the top, and you're left with a net operating budget increase of approximately 1.2 million, or just under 4%. When you apply that to our assessment calculation, the new assessment split for the towns is 65.4% Hamilton and 34.6% Wenham. This results in an increase of approximately 5.5% for Hamilton and 1.1% for Wenham. That is our operating assessment. Then you layer in our debt. Overall, our debt is approximately $585,000. It grew roughly 1.7%. So when you combine both the operating assessment and the debt assessment, our combined assessment is growing at approximately 3.89%. So that was everything we talked about last week. Now we're moving on again to phase 4. So just to kind of start with the basics in the most simplest of terms, what is E&D? E&D really is all the leftover money from the prior year. E&D is the money we budgeted last year to spend, but we actually did not spend. This relates to the expenses. E&D is also the extra money that we took in last year that we never expected to, This is the revenue side of the house. So that's what E&D is, but why does our E&D exist? So just from the beginning, we started the year with approximately 1.3 million in E&D reserve. Now, this is all the money from the prior years before FY21. It's all the unspent money from all the prior years. It's all the revenues we received over the budget. So you start out with your 1.3 million. From there, you have to add in any increases in revenue. So again, this is the revenue we collected last year that we never anticipated collecting. It was approximately $900,000. As everyone knows, this is mainly due to the Chapter 70 funds we received last year. After that, you add in the amount of expenses that we anticipated spending, but actually did not. This accumulated to about 2.2 million and was mainly due from unanticipated COVID-19 reductions, closures, and cancellations that happened throughout the year. So just simply, you take those three numbers together and you end with your E&D balance. Right now, it's just under 4.3 million. So that's kind of where you start off. You have your 4.3 million, so what can you do with it? So there's one little caveat with E&D. You're allowed to keep what's equivalent to 5% of your subsequent year's budget. So at the end of FY21, we're allowed to keep 5% of our FY22 budget. That's what the state says. If we were to do that, it would accumulate to roughly 1.9 million. But locally, internally, we say we're only going to keep 3%. That comes out to approximately 1.1 million. So at the end of the day, what is our recommendation? So I developed this chart to kind of spell out what we're trying to do here. So about a month ago, I submitted our E&D for certification. Hopefully we receive it back before our final vote. I submitted it. It was approximately $4.2 million. The first step is we're recommending that we maintain that 3%. So right off the top, we recommend that we keep 1.1 million. That leaves approximately 3.1 million. We committed to the FY23 budget to return to the towns the excess Chapter 70 money. We're recommending that we fulfill that commitment. That takes off approximately 773,000. And then the last two items is what we were kind of, swirling around the leadership team. So as you heard tonight, there's a lot of facility issues around the district. So we know we have to take these head on, but at the same time, we have to complete our facilities study. Both the towns have to do a master plan, and we really want to come together as one unit, all three entities, and kind of map out what the future holds for us and what the big capital projects are. So we don't want to recommend at this time any big capital projects that will interfere with anything in the future. But at the same time, we know we have to face these things. So we're recommending that we take some of that money and put it towards extraordinary maintenance next year. So we already have a few items on the list, but as you heard tonight, that could grow a little bit. The intercom system at the middle school, middle school and high school, we knew about it, but I didn't get how much of a serious issue it was until tonight. So the list that we have under here might change before the final, and it even might change as next year rolls out. But at this time, we want to dedicate approximately $325,000 to do extraordinary maintenance across the district. So then that leaves approximately $2 million that we're recommending that we put in an OPEB trust. Now, from my point of view, this is probably the most fiscally responsible thing we could do. Investing $2 million in OPEB today will grow to nearly $10 million by the time this liability comes to fruition, somewhere around 30 to 50 years from now. I know it's a long time, but you always got to think of the future, even though it's pretty far away. But the main point of this is this money was supposed to be for the students of today. We were supposed to spend it last year on these kids. Putting this money away today will save the future generations thousands of dollars off their real estate tax come 30 years from now. So I know we didn't spend the money on them now, but us dedicating this now, it is us spending the money on it. It's just they won't realize it, 30 years from now. Not only will this money grow to nearly $10 million, but it will also increase our discount rate. I'm not sure how familiar you are, but when you calculate our OPEB liability, the actuarials factor in what they call a discount rate, which is how much your investment will grow between now and the future. Right now, they're only calculating it at approximately a little bit over 2%. If we invest this money today, it brings our discount rate somewhere between 4 and 5%, which reduces our overall liability by almost another $10 million. So making this move in the long run almost reduces our total OPEB liability by a little less than $20 million by investing this $2 million today. So you can see how doing this will grow substantially over time. So that is the main recommendations on what we would like to use the E&D for. The next couple of slides kind of breaks out what would happen if we didn't do this and why we're using kind of one-time funds to supplement the budget. So if we were to move that recommendation forward, I've developed the next two slides, the DAC category and the DESI category. So just, two things I want to point out is you see the $325,000 here under the capital and fixed assets. I have been in conversation with the auditors, just making sure I'm correctly classifying this. And that all depends on what the ultimate projects are going to be. So depending on how much they cost is what category you put them in. Right now, we're thinking about a lot of small projects across the district. So if that does pan out in the next budget presentation, you might see this 325 spread out amongst other categories. But right now, just so you guys could visualize it, I thought it would be best to kind of at least put the whole thing in its own category. The next item is the $2.4 million you see here under fringe benefits. The growth rate of about 40%, that's where the other $2 million in OPEB is sitting. So this is it in DAC form. And this is it in our DESI category. Just to point it out again, you can see the $325,000 here. And I believe the $2 million is right there. So that's the two different categories. So if you take this recommendation, what does it mean for our assessment? So just to quickly walk through it again, you saw the slides a couple slides ago. The biggest difference is your top line though. You can see now we have a much bigger growth rate. This is because our top line now includes roughly $2.4 million in additional expenses. If you kind of flip back and forth, you can see this bottom line has no change. It's the same thing as before. But then again, the bottom line will grow by the same amount, the roughly $2.4 million. So then roll it forward and you take away our operating funding sources. Now you can see the change in our E&D right here. Before it was only listed at $770,000. Now you see it at roughly $3.1 million. Again, the growth rate there is the same exact amount, the roughly $3.4 million, $2.4 million, sorry. So the net result is again a 1.2 increase or approximately 3.9%. So then again, apply that to the assessment and you can see Hamilton is 5% and Wenham is again 1%. So just to bring it back, this is the same slide as slide 5 I showed you before. Their net assessments did not change. So the addition here, it doesn't have an effect on the town assessments. It does have an effect on our overall budget, but as most of you know, your budget is your revenues have to equal your expenses. So all we did here was add the same amount in expenses to the same amount in revenue, which with the equation results in no difference. So the next couple slides, I'm trying to show you guys what would happen if we didn't do this. So this first slide here is the same exact assessment we had on the previous page. I just simplified it for you. So instead of listing out all the different funding sources, I just have them on one simple line so you can see what's going on. You can see the top, again, is the same amount. We have a growth rate of approximately 4.8 million, or roughly 12%, but our net overall operating budget is still the same 4% with the same assessments going to Hamilton and Wenham. So this is what we are recommending. This is what the previous slide showed. Normally, we don't really have a phase 4. If we did, we don't normally, when we have E&D, we don't normally add one-time expenses. We normally just give the money back to the towns in the normal budget process. If we were to do that this year, this is what the result would be. We would have our 6.5% growth, which is what we've presented to you in the prior school committee meeting. But now we have the whole $3 million in E&D here, which would result in an overall net reduction to our budget of approximately 3%. When you turn that into the assessment, it would mean that Hamilton's overall assessment would go down roughly $360,000 or 1%. And Wenham's would go down approximately $670,000 or roughly 5%. Now, I'll point it out because it was weird to me. Why is Wenham's bigger than Hamilton's when Hamilton has a bigger assessment? That's because of the assessment shift. So not only did Wenham's budget go down because of the overall reduction, but now it went down even further because the assessment shift went away from Wenham and towards Hamilton. Thought I would just point it out because it did look weird to me. So normally what I do when I build a budget is I always try to look 2 budgets ahead. So right now we're building the FY23 budget. I always try to see what does this have on our 24 budget? Because whatever we do today, we're gonna have to deal with in years to come. So I always try to roll things forward and see what they look like in FY24. So I went and I looked back and calculated what is our normal gross operating increase in the past 5 years. So over the past 5 years, we see roughly a 5.13% gross operating increase. So all I did was take our FY23 budget without the additional one-time expenses and rolled it forward a year, applying 5%. So that's what this top line is, but now you can see the total funding sources is decreasing from one year to the next. This is the one-time E&D. So as a result, our net operating budget year over year would see an increase of nearly 16%. Now this is definitely assuming certain things, you know, it obviously probably wouldn't roll out like that, but if we just had our normal year over year increase and our normal lack of revenue increases that we normally see around here, we would have a massive increase from one year to the next. And this is obviously because of the one-time revenue that was infused in the 23 budget and then completely removed in the 24 budget. So again, the result would be an almost 16% increase. And I'm sure, you know, we understand that now, but applying that at town meeting, trying to explain from one year to the next to a room full of people, they might not grasp it as good as we do. They're just gonna look at it and see, I can't believe it's 16%. So that's what it would be with no shift, but that never happens. There's always an assessment shift. This year, we had an assessment shift of 1%. I cut that in half for this example to not be as dramatic in the numbers, but yet the numbers are still dramatic. So all I did was use a 5% shift. So the first slide I have here is a 5% shift towards Hamilton, going away from Wenham. So 0.5, sorry, 0.5, a 0.5%, sorry. So apply that here, and you can see that Hamilton's rate, Hamilton's assessment in FY20, assuming everything I said, would be nearly 17%. With Wenham's being 14.7. And then I wanted to show you the reverse. What happens if we make a shift towards Wenham instead of towards Hamilton? The result of that is almost an 18% increase to Wenham. Now, those numbers are drastic. That's why I always try to look 2 years out and try to use this year's budget to help us navigate next year. I'm hoping with this recommendation, you guys will see that I'm trying to eliminate the kind of peaks and valleys in the assessments year over year. I would really never recommend adding this much to our gross budget, but if we don't add this and we don't take it under control ourselves, we're gonna be looking at something like this next year, if not next year, the year after. So applying this kind of formula at least keeps it under our control and will reduce the overall shortfall that we're gonna see in FY24. I have one more slide here. So that's with the whole 3 million, but what I want you guys to realize is that this is already gonna happen, just not to the extent that I'm trying to avoid. So we already committed the 770,000 for this year's budget. So assuming again that we end this year exactly where we should, that 770,000 is gonna go away in FY24. So again, if we apply our normal 5% increase to our gross, but we remove that additional 2.3 million that we would add in this year, we're gonna have a gross operating budget in '24 that's a reduction of about 5%. But again, we now lose the $3.1 million in E&D, and the result of it is still an increase of 8.5%. So again, that's strange. We're decreasing our overall budget by 0.5%, but yet our net budget is increasing nearly 8.5 points. So you can see again that that's just because of the one-time revenue source, which is why I always try to stress never use E&D to balance your budget, because the first time you do it, you're going to have a complete shortfall the second year that's going to create that peak and valley from one year to the next. So I know a lot of that is confusing, and I tried to make it as simple as I could and try to at least stress what we're trying to avoid next year. Just from my point of view, OPEB, again, is probably the most fiscally conservative thing you can do. To me, I really think we need to help the generation that hurt most during COVID-19, and that's the kids that are there in school today, and this is gonna be their liability. OPEB, at the end of the day, is basically expenses that our generation has guaranteed to the employees of Hamilton Wenham that we're not paying for. We're kicking the can down the road to the future generation to pay for it. This money was supposed to be for them. It's just my feeling, keep it with them and try to help them in the future because they suffered so much in the last year during the pandemic. So that is at least our recommendation. You guys can ask me anything you want.
Thank you so much, Vinny. Questions, Julia?
I just want to reiterate a conversation that we had in the capital finance meeting, because I think it's a really important point, because some people might see the 325K and say, well, why isn't it 1 million for capital with all those unmet needs? But when we talked about it at the meeting, and you could probably speak more to this, Superintendent Tracy, that we talked about the labor shortages and material shortages and the fact that we already have about a ton of projects ongoing now that are not going to be finished. So I just wanted to reiterate to the public that we really discussed and thought about that 325 and why we thought that would be reasonable.
It's important to understand, you're absolutely right, it's important to understand that the 958,000 we took as capital in previous budgets is still not spent because of shortages, because of COVID, because of the inability to get workers in. It's just dragging it out. I think there's almost 600,000 not expended money out of that. Projects that will happen, we're just still trying to line all those pieces up.
Yeah, so even if we wanted to fix the intercom system, we may or may not be able to, depending upon what the supply chain and the personnel is available, so, yeah. And that was a good point, Julia. I'm glad you said that, because I kind of forgotten the exact details of that, but that was a good point. Yeah, that was a very good point, yeah.
Michelle Horan?
Michelle and Dave could probably speak to this. I think, was it 2016 when it failed in Wenham to fund OPEB at a certain amount of money? And that failure cost us X amount because we weren't able to fund OPEB at the time. So what you're saying, and I think we all agree, is that funding OPEB now is, like you're saying, the most fiscal thing to do and prudent thing.
Yeah, in my mind, it's the number one fiscally responsible thing.
And it's best practice, right? That's, the industry is saying this is best practice now, to fund OPEB, and we have the money.
Yeah, yep. The only more fiscally responsible thing we could do is put the whole thing to it.
And do you have numbers on, I guess it doesn't matter, I was just thinking what the numbers would be, how much it would cost us if we didn't fund it. So that might be a question that people will ask us, you know, but if we don't fund it, it's gonna cost us X amount. And
It's not so much that it costs us more because we're not funding it, it's just we're kicking the can down the road and.
And the better rate we get a better rate or not?
Correct. If we infuse something like this, our discount rate goes from something like 2% to 4%.
Okay.
And that's just what actuarials, I always say it wrong, calculated at. The actual return that people are seeing are more like 7%. That's just how they calculate it, though. They'll never put a calculation at 7% in there.
Okay, great, thank you.
But just to clarify but it is saving, it says just saving us future money, correct?
This is saving us future money,
right,
and this $2 million by the time comes will be almost $10 million because of the rate of return. That's if the stock market stays the way it is, obviously.
Right. Okay. David?
Yeah, I mean, just to be real quick, this is fantastic, but I didn't look at these notes ahead of time, and when I flipped through and actually saw the OPEB recommendation on there, I actually squealed a little. I don't know if you heard.
I did hear it a little.
You know, for like Michelle and I, who have been here long enough when OPEB was really a hot topic issue, and we really dug deep into it that one year. You know, I know it's sort of been haunting me, haunting Michelle, you know, it's a very confusing, right? So I really like your presentation at the end too, because there will be some, you know, questions from the public, because it is really confusing, but that's a tremendous amount of money. It's a tremendous investment into our district and our future as a district. I understand your concern, Vinny, saying that like, hey, this isn't us necessarily giving it directly to our kids in the form of, you know, teachers and things like that, but, you know, just knowing that we're actually investing in the long-term success, you know, financial success of this district is amazing, and it's a fantastic opportunity. And then, Julie, to your point, that like why we don't, you know, like try and find a plumber right now, you know. So it's only one sink, but, you know, it'll probably take 3 years to get in there. But just really, really great job. Really, really, you know, your dedication to the district is very evident in flowcharts.
Anna?
I just want to pick up the ball about sort of making sure we understand and are explaining it to the public. I remember that the auditor specifically mentioned that this last year our liability increased. I think it was about $5 million because of that discount rate decreased. And he specifically said, if you had funded your OPEB, you would have retained this, you would have had this. So I feel like, you know, we're getting a lot of, I mean, some of it's common sense information. Like it's almost like making an extra mortgage payment, right? Like you're reducing what you owe. You know, it's a combination of reducing what you owe and getting a better rate, you know? And so by the time you grow that investment, like you said, it's $10 million of investment and $10 million because you have a better rate. So I think most people conceptually should be able to understand that. But I think it's really important that, you know, we're responding directly to feedback from the auditors received very recently, who was looking at the books and said, this year, your liability increased by $5 million because you didn't do this. So I just feel like, I agree it's not glamorous, but it's so much the right thing to do. And I think in framing it as an investment in the district, you know, the district is not just what happens in the classroom today with the kids, you know, and as a governing body, we have to think about the buildings and the teachers and the long-term liabilities, and it's not just about what are they learning in second grade right at this minute. So I like the fact that we're being smart, strategic, you know, as from a business perspective, and I think the way you've laid it out, I actually find it really easy to follow, and I think the public will too. So really good job.
Thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, and I'd just like to add in my little, like, you know, conversations with some of the people, there's some support for this at the level of people that we'll be meeting with next week. And the important thing is when we go to town meeting as a united group, we get the results that we want. And we saw that last year. And I think that we're going to find next week that there's going to be pretty much a unanimous agreement that that's the road to go. And so I 100% support that. And I also think it really just puts us in a position where we haven't done nothing with the crisis we had. We've kind of solved another problem with that. And I think that that's a great idea. And I'm glad that we're going to be doing that OPEB investment.
Okay. Anybody else? Eric?
I think it's important also for people to understand, like Vinny and I talked.
I'm sorry, I can hear you, but can you talk into the mic for the
I think it's
recording?
important for people to understand, as Vinny and I talked yesterday, we met with the town manager, town administrator, and their finance people. You know, we're all trying to work towards keeping things under control now and in the future. And you saw the impacts, possible impacts down the road of 16%. Neither of these communities can swallow that, not at all. And that will bounce back to us and end up, you know, we'll have to start digging deep at cuts and things like that. So I think it's important for people to know, not only is it, you know, fiscally responsible to fund OPEB future, but also to manage the future balances and the future requests from the school department so that our communities can continue to grow as well.
All right. Thank you both. Thank you. Okay, next up, we are going to do our regular review of the face covering policy and data. So Eric, you're up again.
Put on my eyes here. Just a quick review of the data that I was able to collect before this had to be posted. And this leads into the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Even though it says the 26th, I just included the whole week. The 24th was the last day we were actually counting these current cases. Town of Hamilton, 9 new in the last 7 days previous to the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Wenham, 14. An increase to 14 in the last 7 days previous to Thanksgiving. And then the aggregate increase, 58 new cases across both communities. Excuse me. And then our positive cases listed here for that same week. 1 at the Cutler, 3 at the Winthrop, 3 at the Miles River, 0 at the Bucher and the high school. I can say those numbers have even gone up even higher this week. I haven't posted them yet, but they are, in some cases, twice as high. So that's kind of the result of what we're seeing, just based on the Thanksgiving bump that we expected. We kind of knew it was going to happen.
there's definitely an interesting thing occurring with the positive cases. People were reaching out during the weekend to the nurses because their families or their kids got sick during the break, and they were tested during the break. So the kids, you know, in one school, 6 kids never made it to school because the parents kept them home and tested them at home. So that was a fortunate thing for us, where those 6 cases could have been many more. So in the case of one school, that happened, but I think, you know, our nurses spent the weekend fielding calls and emails and, you know, their usual going above and beyond, just kind of trying to keep up with it all. But we're not seeing the spread in schools. So that's something important to keep in mind. We're not seeing, you know, a whole lot of spread in schools. We're getting a lot of these cases, and you can see it when we look at the pool testing. You're seeing, you know, 1 or 2 cases a week picked up by pool testing. We get so many more by parents or families reaching out to us, or through contact tracing through the town nurses. So it's kind of an interesting thing we've been talking about at the school level, where you're seeing those cases at home that are family generated. So mom, dad, 1 or 2 kids, you know, 3 of them might come up positive at one time. So it's interesting that they're being able to catch that at home, test at home, and then not send their kids to school. So that's generally what we see.
But is it interesting or not? Because at home, you're not wearing a mask, and
Yeah.
when you're at school, you are. So it seems to be spreading when you're not wearing a mask, it seems, yeah.
Also, it sounds to me like
People
parents
being
are taking this really seriously and doing a good job in terms of contacting school when they're, does
For the
that
most
seem
part,
accurate?
yeah,
It sounds.
it's not 100%. We know of other cases just through the town nurses that they get picked up in contact tracing, so that are not school-related. They just might be adults. So we generally know that if an adult in a household is positive, we couldn't, you know, we need to quarantine families, unfortunately. Some of that results in, 10 and 18-day exclusions for some kids, unfortunately.
So to be clear, you're saying that even though the cases are going up, and in some cases double per school, it's still our belief that it's not spreading at the schools. It's spreading through community exposure, after school, sports, parties, et cetera, et cetera.
I would say that. I think also the mitigation factor has a piece of it as well. You're still sanitizing, there's still social distancing. I was at the Winthrop School today, I was eating lunch 6 feet apart. That's what these marks on the floor are, locations for kids to eat. So those factors help, as we know, they're not 100%, but I think it's helping to really keep the spread out of the schools.
Okay.
And then,
I don't know if are there any questions on that before we move on to the draft plan? So next up is, did you want to show I'm sorry, do we want to show the parent survey? Did you want to do that too?
I saw it, I'm good.
Okay.
people,
I think we
yeah,
saw it
people,
at the last
Good.
meeting.
Well,
Well,
Didn't we
this
see it
is
at the
just the
last meeting?
breakdown by school.
this was the breakout, the people
yeah,
that
this was
Deanna
just
asked
more
for last
detail that had been asked for.
Yeah, I did
But
see
So I
that.
I'm good.
Good.
Okay.
I just wanted to say ahead of the draft plan, I think Eric is going to speak to it being, a draft for us to be, prepared for this some point in the future. I just want to say I'm glad to have this conversation because not only to be planful for the future, but also I think it's important for transparency. This is something that our administration is planning for at some point, and it's good to have as much transparency on that as possible so that people can see, we the school committee can see, and the public can see what is the current thinking, even though we don't have a specific date. So, all right, I'm going to turn that over to you, Eric.
Okay. It's important to keep in mind we're balancing this with also what we know about vaccination rates, especially at 6th grade. We know about 53% of the kids have at least one shot at the 6th grade level. You know, then you got to take that out 3 more weeks. They can't get their second shot for 3 weeks. So now you're into December vacation. So as I said to a number of you on the phone, there's not really a rush to put this through, but I thought tonight I would just put this out there and then ask for questions, let everybody digest it, and then maybe have the discussion next meeting. And I've got some good questions. I reached out to various sources like DESE to try and get some answers on some whys that some of you have asked already, but I'm certainly willing to entertain any questions for clarification, or even things that maybe should be followed up with other agencies. I have, the nurses have seen it, unions have seen it, I just had a discussion yesterday with a teacher about it, you know, and their concerns as well. So they're, you know, it's out and about. After this meeting, I'd like to send it out even further and get more community feedback, but I thought, present it here, ask some questions, and then have the discussion on the 16th, if that works for everybody.
Can I ask for a point of clarification?
Sure.
Sure.
Number 7, it says return to masking if the number of cases at the school reaches 5 in any 7-day period. Does that mean, like, if you have 5 students, whether they come to school or not, or 5 cases that we know originated at the school?
Yeah, that's why I put at the school, so I can also say originated at school.
Okay.
So I would say pool testing would be one of the ways. I mean, we can talk about that. That's really one of those things that, do we look at all cases? You know, like in the case of the school I was just talking about, there are 6 known at home and 2 that got picked up just by symptomatic at school.
Right.
So that's definitely a discussion point.
Yeah, Michelle?
I'm sure they're in hot demand, but is there any chance you could touch base with the Hopkinton superintendent or high school principal?
Yeah, Brian actually talked to the assistant principal, I think about a week ago, just before Thanksgiving, right, Brian?
It was the principal.
Okay.
Yeah, just to maybe get some feedback on, you know, or you can lend what you heard or talked to. Not now, but, you know, yeah, not now.
Yeah, he did get it. We also learned that Long Meadow is another community that started during that same time period, so we can reach out to them as well.
Can you?
What do we have for a plan in place on the flip side, right? As our numbers increase this week, and we can expect them to probably, you know, go through another bubble after Christmas break or winter break. I think we're probably on the 1-year anniversary of the holiday party last year that shut down school for a couple of weeks.
Yep.
You know, what are we going to do? Because the mask policy, when we get permission from DESE, it's an open-ended date. We can choose to roll that out however, whenever we want. If we get a sudden influx of cases, that's going to be overnight, right? We're going to need to make decisions within hours, right? This is days, weeks, right? So what do we have in place for a plan if these numbers continue to sort of go the way they're gonna go, factoring in, you know, it is, you know, theoretically flu season, and, you know, that's where I'm more concerned with, right? To make sure that we're able to take immediate action, that we can keep these schools up and running, keep everyone in the classrooms as much as possible, right? Because like I said, that's something that needs to have very specific plan in place, because it'll, you know, March 13th, man. Like, it happened overnight.
Yeah.
I think we'll take tomorrow off. Like, I remember being on the phone with Julie. We're gonna play it safe. I think we'll take tomorrow off. And, you know, we're still reeling from it.
Anna?
I think my concern in looking at this, I share Jen and David's concern about, you know, this number 5 being a little bit amorphous of, you know, how are we going to know, and if there's a delay in testing, and, you know, I do feel like I want that to be something either more responsive or something a little bit clearer, because I mean, I think even though the transmission hasn't been happening in school. If we take masks off, I would fully expect that we might start to see that. But the kids tend to congregate by school outside of school. And so even though they might not be there, I just feel like, you might have a kid who wasn't in school, but is interacting with students who are in school. I think I agree with Jen. I think that needs to be fleshed out a little bit. I want to go back to number 6 a little bit, just to make sure I understand and the teachers understand and the public understands. So we could designate in Aspen the students who are not yet able to unmask, and the teachers could see that. And that is, lawful. There's no HIPAA issue around that. We're in compliance. I guess my only concern is then it puts the onus onto the teacher. If they say a student without a mask, then they have to go to Aspen and be like, is David Polito on my list? Yes, no. And now the teacher's put into a spot of having to, one, do the legwork to keep a list of every student, like they have to do it. Or maybe the school nurse can give them a list per period, or logistically, that's just adding some extra work to the teachers that I'm a little bit leery of putting that on them. But then it also forces them into that point of confrontation. And I think I'd want them to go back to point 4. So let's say in that scenario, I'm the teacher and David is my student and he is not supposed to be unmasked. And here he comes not wearing a mask and refuses to put it on. Now we've created a conflict point that the teacher has to deal with, or the principal has to deal with, or someone has to deal with. So I'd want to make sure that we're all on the same page about what that looks like and if we're okay putting that burden on the teachers. Am I understanding how that would work correctly based on this Aspen logo and the, Okay.
I am going to just be mindful that I really tried to be respectful about our protocols and our time, and it is 10 o'clock. Is that why you have your hand raised, Michelle?
Yeah, my question was, I didn't hear what I didn't process what Eric said about what the goal of the discussion was tonight and what the goal of the 16th was. And then that's going to be my next question.
Okay.
So the goal tonight was just to present the plan, field some questions, not necessarily answer them, I'm just actually tracking them right here, coming back on the 16th and having a stronger conversation, I guess, because I still want to get information from the Department of Education that's connected to several questions that people asked me yesterday on the phone. So I just want to...
So I can hold questions till then, or the conversation?
Or send them to me, whatever, if you go home and say, oh, I just thought of this question, please email me and I'll continue to chase those things out. I think it's important to just keep looking at different iterations and to make sure like we're able to check in with another school district who's doing it, and so far not having issues, but we'll continue to do that.
And on the 16th, is it possible this plan might have a little bit more granular detail on some of these things we're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm actually going to just say, I'm going to make a motion. It's 10:02. I'm going to make a motion. I think we actually have about, maybe 10-ish more minutes, but I'm going to make a motion that I move that we extend the meeting for up to half an hour if needed. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Anna. All in favor? That's 4. Those opposed? That's 3 opposed. Okay, so we will continue onward. All right. That was a tight vote. Okay. Speaking of which, policy BE is on our exhibit.
Did you do that on purpose? I think you did it on purpose, Dan.
Yeah, I did.
I noticed it was at the end, and I was like, oh, we're going to get to it.
Who's going to be speaking to that?
I'll speak to this.
Go ahead, Anna.
So if you recall, a few weeks ago, we had this up for a first reading, and there seemed to be consensus from this body that we did not like the under no circumstances line. It was sent back to policy, and just as a point of sort of future knowledge, when we brought it back to policy, Dorothy Presser said, you didn't have to do that. If you all sort of agreed that you didn't like the line, you could have just removed it at that time, which is sort of ironic. So she said, well, you could have just done it there. But so we brought it back to policy, we talked about it, and everyone in policy was in agreement that we could very easily strike that line since no one seemed to really like it. So what you have before you is the original BE, and we are proposing we strike out the under no circumstances line that you're looking at, so.
Okay. Can I have, I would entertain a motion to approve that policy.
I move that we accept the duration of school committee meetings policy as presented.
Second.
Second by Michelle Bailey. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous, and the motion passes.
Point of clarification?
What was that?
Point of clarification?
Yes.
Is it our intention that this goes into effect immediately, or is this a policy in form?
That wasn't in the motion.
I am not able to answer that question because despite being explained to me numerous times, I'm never clear on that.
I'm going to let Michelle maybe clarify, but I would believe that because of the way the motion was framed, it went into effect immediately because we didn't clarify it was in form. So I think it did go into effect immediately.
Okay, and we're following it right now.
We're just doing it, okay. Just to be clear, so this policy is now live.
We're on borrowed time right now.
Okay.
Important thing on that is that because we're still hosting our own policies,
Yes.
somebody in the central office has to post that policy, because, yeah.
Okay, Eric, I know you have gotten to share quite a bit tonight. I'm not sure if you have more superintendent's report.
I do not. I'm going to defer
yeah.
only because we just came out of break
Yeah,
and
no.
not a lot of committee
And
action happening.
We
so
I
I will save the
There's a
time.
lot of updates tonight.
Could
Right. Stay champs.
take a motion to adjourn? Would that be
the-
allowed by the chair?
Okay, yes, I have,
I would move to adjourn at whatever time it is now, like 10:06, 10:07.
is there a second?
Second.
Second by David. All right, all those in favor? 3. Those opposed? 4. The motion fails. I literally only have one more thing to say, which is,
There we go.
all I wanted to say was, everyone remember that we have the meeting next Wednesday, December 8th. Please make sure that you have it on your calendars. Time? 7 o'clock. It is on Zoom.
On Zoom.
That is at the request of some of our town boards would like to meet on Zoom, and so that we are doing that to accommodate them. All right, now, I'll take a motion to adjourn?
Well,
No? Oh,
did
you have
you,
something?
I'm sorry, point of order. Did you want to talk about the scheduling for DEI workshop and other things?
Oh, I'm so sorry. You're right. See, I tried to,
I don't know why we're so eager to adjourn. We just
I
have a
know,
couple
well, I was
more
trying to be
things talk about.
accommodating. Okay,
Where are you
on,
gonna go, Ed?
I did. I
wanted
asked
to-
you all to do that. Thank you so much, Anna. We are hoping to find, so Eric has arranged or spoken to get a DEI workshop for the school committee on a Saturday morning, 2.5 hours. And I would like to just put it out there, what Saturdays in January or February are you available? I'm happy to go through them one at a time, or you can, I know you all brought your calendars because I sent you that.
2.5 hour.
It's 2.5 hours, so it'll be like 8 to 10:30 or 9 to 11, 9 to 11:30 in that ballpark.
Saturday is a good day for me personally. So Saturday
Okay.
mornings in
All right,
January.
somebody who's only got a limited number, give me what day works for you.
I can't do the 15th.
Okay.
Other than that,
All right, well, let's throw one out then. How about the 22nd of January?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Julia? Michelle?
Yep.
January 22nd, Eric. Oh, Anna, I'm so glad you said that. We got it done.
I'm going to say 9 a.m.
Let's say 9 to 11:30?
I will double check with
Great.
Okay.
I'll bring
Regis.
donuts.
I heard that.
I know.
Okay.
And where is it to be determined?
Do we have a location?
We will probably do it here, but I just want to double check with Regis to see if she wants to do it in a different place.
And let's not do it here. This room is so hard to hear.
No, we could do it at central office, but
Yeah.
probably on this
Yeah.
campus.
Okay, yeah,
There's
yeah,
plenty
yeah.
of places
Yeah,
to do it on
no,
this
that'd be
campus.
great.
Sorry.
Awesome. Okay. All right, that being said, does anyone else have anything else?
That was my main one.
Okay, now I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn at 10:10.
Second.
All right, second by Jen Carr. All those in favor? It is unanimous of the 6 members present, and we are adjourned.